Welcome to Season 7 of True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Bloom. Real talk with those who pledge to keep us safe with grit, sacrifice and determination. Let's get on with the show. This episode of True Blue Conversations is proudly brought to you by Loudon Private Wealth, the team trusted by professionals, veterans and families across Australia to build real long-term financial security. If you want to take control of your finances, protect your future and build real generational wealth, Loudon Private Wealth are the people you want in your corner. They don't do gimmicks, they don't do hype, just smart strategy and honest advice coupled with real-world experience. Check out the links in the description to contact Warren and the team via loudonpw.com.au or 02 8313 0418. Now let's get back to the show. This episode of True Blue Conversations was brought to you by Dead Reckoning Rum, creating individual rum releases commemorating the diggers lost in Afghanistan, proudly supporting veterans, donating 50% of all their profits to veterans organisations around Australia. Look up Dead Reckoning Rum, buy some bottles, connect via Instagram and Facebook and give them your support. Now, let's get back to the show.
G'day, welcome back to True Blue. Today, I'm joined by a good mate of mine who we've been setting his podcast up for a while now. We've known each other for a little while and I've appeared on some projects that he is doing and we'll get to that later on in the podcast. But this man has had a very extensive career in the Western Australian Police, serving for 48 years, still current, but is almost calling time and about to retire. And I think he has earned that retirement after 48 years in the police. And today I'm joined by Geoff Stewart. Welcome to the podcast, mate.
Hey, mate. Good to see you, and thanks very much for the invite. And I'm looking forward to having a chat. We had that first chat in person in Kings Park
we did
a few months ago. But mate, I love the work you're doing. You're doing so much for the veterans and first responders, and I've really enjoyed hearing other people tell their stories as well, which helps us all.
That's right, mate, and we'll get to, as you said, off air, mate, you know, the imposter syndrome. But, mate, no, we're just going to have a chat about your life and, mate, record your story for your grandkids. You know, this is what it's about. And, mate, as I said, 48 years in the job and still going, still currently, you're nearly calling time. And by the time this podcast comes out, you will have retired after 48 years of service to Western Australian Police. But, mate, before we get into your career, let's go back to a young Geoff. Can you, mate, tell us about life growing up as a young fella?
Well, for those in WA and particularly in Perth, I grew up in a place called Nollamara, or as we called it, Knucklemara. But I was born 1961, and Mum and Dad brought a state housing, brand new state housing house in 56, and I've got an older sister, then a brother, and I've got a younger sister. So we all grew up in the 60s around Nollamara. I went to Nollamara Primary, and I went to Mirrabooka High School, and yeah, it was just it was a great time to grow up. Everyone's got their own stories and how fun it is, but yeah, it was just a good time to grow up. I did a lot of outdoor stuff with friends and family and things like that, and I was just mediocre at school, and in fact, that's probably just giving myself too high an accolade too. But yeah, it was that's where I grew up, and I was a city boy, but I've subsequently spent most of my life in the country.
And with that, mate, you said that, you know, mediocre. I think every veteran or first responder I've ever had on the podcast is always the same. Report card used to say, could apply, if applied, could be anything. And I'm guessing you were the same. And did you have any family members that had served in the military or police before you, or were you the first?
Well, in terms of military, not extensively, although my dad, who was born in 32 and has now passed away, rest in peace, Merv, but he was in the RAF for a couple of years when he was young. But apart from that, no, my grandparents were in Mount Hawthorn, and I remember my grandma and granddad had a shelter. They had the street shelter in their backyard and stuff. I remember hearing stories about that during the World War and things like that. But no, I don't have extensive stuff. I subsequently, when I was young, joined the reserves for about 5 years, and I was a rifleman, a grunt with the 1128th in Perth. I did that for a while, and including when I was a cadet and then a constable. So it was, so it wasn't a lot of extensive military experience, but also in terms of policing, there's been only one other Stewart in the job in the police, and that was my great-granddad, James Stewart. And my police number is 6260. So I was the 6,260th person in the job. And James was number 139. And he joined in the late 1800s and retired in the 1920s. And I've got his picture. In fact, that's his picture there. I don't know if that's
wow. Yeah, I can see. Yeah, wow.
Yeah. So there's only been the two of us. And at the police academy in Joondalup, we get to sign. There's like a Bible almost of every single copper that's been in the job, and you can sign next to your name. And so I signed for him as well. So there's only been two of us in the job.
So, mate, talk me through. So your great grandfather served, but where did your willingness to serve come from? Like you mentioned, you joined the reserves, and most people I speak to either go military or first responder, and you did reserves. And why did you choose police and not go full-time army? Because
I joined the police first of all before I went into the reserves, and I got I was serving at ballistics as a cadet and in forensics, and a couple of people were there. About three of them. Lee Townsend, who's no longer with us, was in the Defence Forces, but I had two people, Dennis Reed and Alan Grono, who are ex-SAS as well, and they told me you should go and get in the reserves, and I was only 17, I think, and so I did that, and they encouraged me to do that, and I'm glad they did. And but I just love being in the police, even at a young age. But I got to the police probably because of my mediocre and lesser mediocre results. Back in the mid-70s, there was apprenticeships everywhere and stuff. I just wanted to be a sparky. I wanted to be an electrical apprentice, and I tried at the end of year 10, and I couldn't get one. And the only job I got apprenticeship was as a machine operator at the old Midland workshops, the railway workshops. And I didn't like school, so I went there. And first day induction, and it was, and this is all due respect to anyone who worked at the railway workshops, and this is a long time ago, Adam, but all I can remember is old guys and young kids working there. It was dirty, and it just looked a bit sad, and so I said, I can't do this. So after one day, I went home and said to Mum, I'm going back to school. So I did year 11, and during year 11, a copper came out and spoke to us about cadets and things like that, but you had to do year 11. You had to complete year 11. So I did that, and, mate, I failed every single subject, because I just wasn't invested in stuff like that. And they applied, and an application came out for cadets, so I applied before the end of the year. And it was before the end of the school year, towards the end of the school year. And so I applied, and I got in. And I started on the 4th of January, 1978. And you know how results from high school comes out in the new year. And they asked me at the interview, how did you go? And I said, I think I went okay. I failed everything. And I even remember my best subject was history. And that was only because I did a history project, and you could do a moment in history or a family history. And I'm putting myself under the bus here. Now I've started this story, I have to finish it. And but we'd just been to King's Park, actually, where we met, and all our families got together, and one of the family members did a family tree, and every family got an A4 binder with all the family history and photographs of all and so I just photocopied that and submitted. And that was my best subject, but I still failed it but that was my best project I ever did. And Mum's still alive. She's 90, and she's going to hear this probably, and she's going to think, you bastard. And
don't worry about plagiarism, mate. Don't worry about plagiarism.
Yeah. So, but mate, I got in the job and started on the 4th of January. So when the results came out, and they were that I failed everything, it was too late. I was up and going. So, so I started on the 4th of January '78, and quite quickly I just realised that I love the sense of team. Yep. And things like that. And I served at some places like I went to Crim Records section in headquarters, which is still our headquarters, in the days before the Wacker had grandstands. So we're on the 3rd floor, so you could just work, and when there was a test on, you could just go and watch Dennis Lilly and Rod Marsh and all those guys play. But I was there for a while. Then after that, I went to ballistics, and we used to have, before TRG, the emergency squad, and that was kind of like ballistics was kind of the base of that. And so I got to see all these people who became legends in the police force, to me anyway, and a lot of people would know them, the likes of Frank Zanetti and Bruce Brennan, who's one of the best deputy commissioners we've ever had. And so I got to see them, and so I did ballistics for a while, and I got my first real sense about how dangerous policing was, because in 1979, Bill Pence was murdered on duty down at Mount Barker, and Jim Keelan was a sergeant with him, and Jim was seriously wounded, and the van was shot at by the offender. And I remember the van came up to ballistics to be inspected. I just remembered seeing these holes over the van and thinking, shit, this job, it carries risk. And so that was I got to see something like that. And but I went to a couple of other sections before I went in the academy, and then graduated in 1981 as a constable.
So talk me through that process, mate, because you've got your process with your cadets, and then you join the academy, and mate, it's 1980, so it's 1978, and then you go 2 years, so 1981 you go into the academy, mate. Political correctness doesn't exist like it does today. Was the academy hard?
Not really. Yeah, and bear in mind it's nearly 50 years ago. So, but back then it was only 12 weeks. Now I think it's 6 months, and it's quite intensive now what they do, and we have so many other things that they do now that we just didn't do. But back then it was just 12 weeks, and I remember even when I applied, I think I didn't have a license, so I think Mum or Dad might have driven me out to the academy, and I remember going in, and it was just a classroom with single desks, and they gave you pieces of paper, and we had to do some maths and some writing and things like that. So it was very old, but the academy, I just remember it was fun. There was only 30 of us. We went through a period where the schools became really small because the government chose to reduce spending on police, but they had to put all the cadets through. And but it was just, I remember basic subjects and some law and that, a lot of PT, and a lot of WA coppers that would remember Bert Omega was the PT instructor, scary as all buggery to a young fella, but became an absolute legend, and an APM recipient too. But I didn't mind it. And like I did in school, I'd never studied too much. I just wing it like I do a lot of things in life. I just study the night before and things like that. But I graduated, and back then you were given a number based on where you went in the academy, and not like nowadays where everyone gets a medal type thing. And so it's not. I think it's done on alphabetical order now. But back then, where you were in the academy, how well you went is where your number was. And I think I was about number 6 or 7 out of about 34, I think I was. So,
okay, yes.
Yeah, so for Nollamara Primary and Mirrabooka High School would be pretty proud of me.
So did you do, like back then, mate, did they take you to the morgue and expose you to dead bodies and
yeah,
and show you what death is?
Yeah, they did. I remember there was definitely a visit we did to the morgue, and they took us in. They prepared us and told us we're about to see a dead body, and the pathologist was going to talk to us and show what they do. And I remember doing that, and I didn't. It didn't worry me too much, and I'll probably talk a bit more about why or how and how I dealt with it or whatever later. But yeah, we were exposed to things like that,
Mm.
and it got us ready for it, and so yeah.
And do they do that now, Geoff, or is it a very different academy now to when you went through?
I don't know if they do the actual showing. I imagine they do because it really does prepare you. But they do so much now, and our academy is so good in what they do in terms of prepare people because they have things I think other police forces would have it too, but we have a scenario village where we've got like a suburban street with a chemist, a tavern, a residence, a business, and a fake police station as well. So people are put there they'll go into the chemist and or might respond to a hold up or something like that, or respond to a mentally ill person in the street or something like that. So it gets in preparation. I've got to tell you too, whenever I think what I would have loved to have seen in the media was when we get criticised for use of force, particularly fatal use of force when people are shot by police. I would love to take the media, particularly the reporters who actually criticise police for, the old thing, why don't you shoot the gun out of their hands, or why don't you shoot them in the arm or the leg or something like that. I'd like to just strap on all the equipment that police take today and say, in another next 30 seconds, there's going to be someone that's going to come out and confront you. We want you to stop them, and then just release someone and charge them with a knife or something like that, and just see what they do.
Mm.
Because, it's such a, as you know, and all the people you speak to and things like that, it's such a dynamic job. But I take my hat off to anyone who joins. Nowadays, people are walking out with a few kilos of equipment and guns and that. When I joined, and this goes back to one of my favourite podcasts you did with Charlie Bassino, and he spoke about having the rubber baton put down the back of his pants. But he did talk about they had a gun. We didn't have guns at all. We just had a pair of handcuffs and a little 12-inch rubber baton down a long pocket in the back of our pants, and that was it.
And your fists.
And then we just had this as the gift of the gab, and that's what I think is so important. It's such a great use of force option as well. But but it's totally different now, and yeah.
It is, mate, and I've had so many police veterans on, mate, that have said, the nowadays you need to be a scientist to be a police officer. And I was talking to a good mate of mine, Panda McFarlane, and he said, goes, mate, I did a trade. And he's like, now these days, he's like, your tradies are missed and he said they're the ones that can speak and have conflict resolution skills because they're on a building site, or they're, it's policing has changed. And yeah, we'll get into that a little bit later, mate.
And I'm like, you just remind me of something. Over the years, I've always heard about, cadets don't have life skills and stuff like that. And I've got to say, I don't really agree with that, because I always look at it like it's the person you are. The people that don't have the life skills that are criticised for the way they are as a person is because they're just a dumbass person sometimes and stuff like that. I've got mates that I went to school with who became apprentice tradies, and I just happened to be an apprentice cop. And when I was an apprentice cop, I went out and did things with other coppers and stuff like that and whatever. But I think it's the person that actually defines you as a person that actually, when it comes into those discussions about, you need life skills. Mate, I was 16, 17, 18 before I was a copper, but I went out and I did things outside the job and had a lot of fun and stuff like that. It's the best coppers are the people who are the best people. Simple as that. And
I agree. Yeah. No, and yeah. I think, mate, what so many police veterans I speak to is that just that little bit of life experience, mate, helps. Like, not, just that, like, because being 18, mate, like, we all remember what we were when we were 18, mate. We were 6 foot tall and bulletproof, mate, and yeah, so it's very. But I understand exactly what you're saying, and mate,
Yeah.
did you bring the family down to see you march out on from the academy?
Mate, my mum and her friend came because Dad was ill and couldn't make it, unfortunately. But he was proud of me and that. But I remember my mum was there, and we did like every other copper would say that in the days of the old days of the graduations, we all did that. We did a lot of marching, and then we had to practice for the rehearsal. And whoever was the square gaiter got to do no marching. They just stood there for the governor's car to come along and open the door. That's the only thing they had to do because they would embarrass themselves. And but yeah, we did that. Mum came and saw me. I know she was really really proud, and as my dad was. But I think I became really strong on service to community and others, and I think I get that from my mum because my mum in her life, she's done so much for service and others. Even when she retired, she formed the Senior Citizens Club where she still lives and had a big part in that, and she was involved in other stuff. She got that's 2000 Centennial Medal,
Yes.
2000 for community service so I think I get a lot of what I do from my mum. So yeah, I'm a mummy's boy.
Oh, mate, so am I, and mate, proud of it, and
Yeah,
we all love our mums, and mate, they're
yeah.
special humans. And did you back then? Did you do a lot of shooting at the academy as well? Was there a lot of, based on
No,
no?
no. We did some shooting, but there again, like I said, there wasn't a real focus on police wearing firearms. Our only people that carried firearms were detectives or some specialist units. But so there was components of shooting that we did at the old academy, but that certainly changed when I went back there a few years later after a series of events and incidents, and we needed to start wearing firearms. Then I went back to ballistics, but straight away I was seconded into the firearms instruction section, which was about weapons and tactics, and then it was just full on all the time then, and we did a lot, and we went through various different bits of equipment and things like that, but there wasn't a lot of shooting back then
And
when I joined.
and with that, did you, after you graduated, mate, did you feel ready to go out into the dangerous world of what policing is? Did you from the academy, from your training?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you're saying about 6 foot and bulletproof and all that type of stuff. You want to go out, particularly having been an apprentice cop, so to speak. You wanted to go out and see if you had what it took, but quite quickly and I'll tell you what, this might be the same for a lot of other people. When I joined and graduated as a constable, you didn't talk to senior sergeants because they were guiding up right up there. I didn't even talk to a commissioned officer. To us, we had shift sergeants, and they weren't too bad. But the ones who we all relied on were the senior connies. They were God to us, so to speak, and things like this. And they taught us all the important stuff, and including where to hide when you're having coffee from the senior sergeants that walking around checking on the beats and stuff like that, and the best places to sleep on night shift, things like that. But also, I think it was on one of your podcasts, someone said it too about, I think it was Todd Bowler, you did from
Yes.
WA Police.
Yeah, Todd. Yep.
And he said something that straight away took me back to memories about if you were in a van with a sergeant that didn't want to work, the radio handset was in his hand, so you couldn't reach for it. So if they said central van free for a job, he wasn't going to answer. And so it was always good fun when you work with another connie and you just did all the jobs and stuff like that. And so, back then it was just the best fun. I had an absolute ball, and I did that for a while before they sent me back to ballistics again for a little while.
And you mentioned that, and so many other police that I've had on, mate, they talk about FTOs, and I know in New South Wales it's field training officers that
Yeah.
they either make or break your career. And Todd mentioned it, so go back and listen to episode
Yeah.
120 with Todd. He was did 22 22 or 23 years, I think. I've done that many podcasts now, I can't
I
remember.
think it was about 23.
Yeah, 23 years and did 15 years in TRG, and actually was good mates with our good friend mate Tim Britton, CV, Cross of Valor. So go back and have a listen to his. But mate, how, like, throughout your career, how important your senior constables, because they really set you on your way as a police officer, don't they?
They do, and as I said, at Central particularly, you learn very quickly that you didn't not take notice of the other ones, but the senior connies, because back then our uniforms changed, but our senior connies had two big stripes, and we only put stripes on one side of our uniform, and but plus two, when I joined, then we still had, I always remember the senior sergeants had these big fat white stripes and the big red crown, but they had their World War II ribbons on and things like this. We had a lot of veterans back then, but they were starting to slow down. But we didn't have field training officers, so to speak, but our senior connies were the ones that showed us the right way to do things, and your ability to quickly succeed or survive in an environment like that depended on you actually listening and being shown by these people. They were absolute gold.
And you mentioned, mate, that you go to ballistics and you're part of the forensics, and then you went into the weapons section. What were you doing here? Were you assisting in the labs, or what were you doing here?
When I went to ballistics, first of all, it was a forensic role, so it was attending scenes of crime, whether it be homicides or suicides of interest for them to check things or whatever. But then it came down to I remember going to postmortems involving firearms, and then checking projectiles for rifling to connect it to a particular firearm if you had one, or connect it to a type of firearm that the investigators might be looking for. There were all these type of things. We're also involved in when stolen motors had their numbers grinded off, and we do chemicals on that to bring it up and things like this. And so a lot of it was back then was about that. I jumped out for a short time, and because I said I've just gone for a couple of years, I just want to get out there and do stuff. So I did a couple, or probably about half a year quickly. And then I said, can I go back and just walk the beat again and do all this? And then I did that, and they put me on a motorbike for a couple of years, and mate, that was just a mint. It was a lot of it. Well, all of it was almost single man patrol. So you're on a motorbike and out you go, and you take it home. That was good fun. And then they told me, they used to tell us we had to go country, and they wanted me to go to a place called Muck and Budden, and out in the wheat belt, I think. And I just built a house, got married, built a house. It wasn't established. I said, I can't go. And they said, you're going. And by chance, the Gazette came out saying there was a spot back at ballistics again full time. So I rode my bike out there, and they said, yeah, Stewie, come back. We haven't got anyone lined up. So I went back there. So I got out. I miss riding the motorcycle. What I did was, when I went back there, we used to own all our fleet, including our motorcycles, and then go to the auctions. And it used to make us laugh when people who aren't coppers say, oh, I brought this cop pursuit car, and it's the best. And we'd all say, do you know what we used to do with those pursuit cars? And but I brought my motorcycle when it came out. So I used that for a while as a to and from. It was good. But then I went back to ballistics. That led in then to, we need to start wearing guns all the time. So we started to need weapons and tactics area. And so I got seconded into that.
And I just want to go back to when you're doing traffic, you're obviously dealing with fatals, and you're being exposed to trauma as you do when you're a general duties police officer. But mate, do you remember obviously like you remember most traumatic events that you've been to, but do you remember the first fatal that you attended when you went to traffic?
Yeah, I do. It was a little girl, and my wife Helen was at my mum and dad's house in Ullamara, and I was based at Warwick Traffic, which is another couple of suburbs away. And I was on the bike, and I had to leave early because there was a call for a young girl that was killed. And I always remember she'd been inside the house, got out the front door, and walked across the road and got bowled over, unfortunately, and passed away. And I remembered that. I was really sad about that. And also the driver ended up, from memory, taking his life because it wasn't his fault, but it was quite traumatic and things like that. But so I remember that. But I think also, as seeing dead bodies, I think I quickly got a lesson in what they were about when I was at ballistics. So going to scenes, and including later on, but I was affected by it, and I can talk about that later, but I didn't have as much trouble as others, I don't think, in seeing things, because I used to see them on a regular basis in postmortems or at crime scenes, and some really graphic ones too, where firearms are involved in that. But but I've got to say, being a motorcycle cop, single man patrol, your own boss, and it was interesting. It was fun, and I regret having to leave early because we had a policy where you must go country, and I subsequently went country and I'm still there. But yeah, but seeing traumatic stuff, it didn't worry me too much until I started being and living in the same town as the people that were dying, if that makes sense. And I can talk about that later.
Yeah, definitely. We'll touch on that, because we'll touch on the countryside of policing, because it's very different to the city side of policing. And you, like, as you mentioned, it's never, it's always a shit part of the job when you lose, children or anybody. And mate, do you remember your first death knock, and was there support back then for you when you were doing that, and did that get better as your career has progressed, that there's more help now for newer members when they give a death notice?
I'm not sure what they get taught now or whatever. I don't remember doing a lot when I was in the city. I don't remember doing a lot at all. But because there were so many of us, I suppose. And but I remember every single one I did in the bush, because, as I said, there's no anonymity. If you did a death knock in the city, you won't see those people again. You'll go there, deliver the news, and you can actually excuse yourself. Oh, I've got to go to a job now, and leave that with you. But when you're in the country, it usually involves your mate's mum or dad, your mate's brother or sister, your mate. They're people that you know. And I suffered badly from that towards the end of my time as sergeant in charge, particularly in the town where I live now. And people that watch this, even my friends, will know this. And in Dunsborough, it just seems to be, better first responders, where we work at places, sometimes they're just shit magnets for everything that seems to happen, goes wrong. And I think I dealt with everything at Dunsborough in terms of death and tragedy, except a plane crash, touch wood. But it was those ones that I knew, and that I found it really hard. And I remember back then too, and this is the thing that coppers don't have nowadays, you used to have the phone go through to your house. So if you lived, and Dunsborough is like a Summer Bay type touristy town, and so it was quite busy. And but there's only a couple of us there at the start, and so after hours, your phone would just keep ringing from people asking anything at all. It just goes through to your house. And in the end, I said to the guys, I'm not going to, and that was to do notifications, or would be to go and do a job and then go and do the notification. I just said to the crew, and there was a couple of guys that would have worn a lot as well. We just said, okay, we just had a roster system. It doesn't matter if you're working, you're not going to do them anymore. And we get someone to come off their weekly leave to do the job. But I had such a tight team with people like Brits and Shane Larson, Andy Wright, Simon Underwood, Lynn Metcher, and a few others as well, where we just shared it. But it really started to affect me later on, but because I was in that same town that I lived in,
and being, we'll segue, and I'll jump back to what I was going to ask you in a minute. But it's a great segue in what you just said, is that country policing, mate, you don't ever, you're a 7 day, like, doesn't matter if you're off the job, you are a 7 day, even if you're not rostered on, because everyone knows you in the town. And I've got a good friend who, she has just retired after 31 years, and she said I loved country policing, but I also hated it because she said, I'd go to church and people would come and tell me about, oh, Joe Bloggs down the road is doing this and that. And she said, well, I'm not a police officer today. I'm just here, I'm just here to be at church. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because in the city, mate, you can switch off and no one knows who you are, but in the country, very different.
It is. It is. Yeah, you're right. We don't switch off. And our job and our union have been doing a lot around disconnect. You just can't disconnect. You can't say to someone, disconnect when you're in a country town. Particularly, I did a lot of small regional and remote places too, where you just can't do that. You can't walk away. And at the end of the day too, I took it as everywhere I went. My first spot, I was the second in charge. After that, every station I went to, I was in charge. So if I went somewhere, I was a sheriff, and that comes with responsibilities. And if people want to talk to me, I'll let them talk to me because I get so much out of it. And but that also goes to integrating yourself into the community too. And we got so many people that are so good at it, and we got people that don't do it well. They'll go to the country, and it's usually not for the lifestyle; it's for the money. And they'll go to work, go home, shut the door, go to work, go home, shut the door. And the only time they talk to their community is when they give them a ticket or they come to the front counter of the police station. They'll do the minimum time and go back and say to their mates, don't go bush, you won't like it. But I was like a lot of people. First thing I did was join the footy club, cricket or basketball or whatever. And you just get integrated in the community and you learn so much that helps us. And plus also when I went country, you work by yourself. So my first country spot was Dongra, which was a crayfishing town. And a couple of times I had to go to the pub and during all the fishermen having a good time, and if there was a blue, but I never worried about it because all my footy mates were in there. And you touch Stewie, you're going to have a problem. And so that's what I loved about country policing. But I didn't mind people wanting to talk to me all the time because I took that as part of the job.
And it's a great tip that you just say for any young, police officer that listens to this, mate, is that like that's a great piece of advice. Don't just think, oh God, I'm going bush for, I've got a posting out to the bush. Oh, it's just like go to work, close the door, integrate into the community, and actually, be part of the community. That's what and it will be a rewarding posting for you because you're integrating with the community and you're protecting them. That's what you're there to do. You're there to serve them and protect them. And mate, do you remember your first arrest?
Gee.
It's almost 50 years ago.
I don't, but it would have been someone for drunk and disorderly or something like that because one of our field training officers told us that if you're doing day shift, you don't want to be stuck doing court duty at Supreme Court or something like that. So find someone that you can take off to help them, give them a meal. You help them by giving them a place to be and get fed. But it would have been something simple like that. And other ones came. I do remember a few of the other ones and that, but later in the thing. But my first one would have been just a street arrest or something like that.
And as I said, mate, tongue in cheek, it's almost 50 years ago, and you know me well enough, Geoff, to be that we could have this banter. And mate, in 1986, you moved to the sharp end of policing and you joined the Protective Services Counter-Terrorism Intelligence Unit. This is pre-TRG in the WA Police, mate. Talk me through this. How did this come up?
Well, it's probably the best place I've ever been to in my, or one of the best places I've been in my career. It used to be a lot of police forces had their special branches, and change of government, I think they changed from special branch to Protective Services Counter-Terrorist Intelligence Unit, and it was the unit that provided VIP security. I think Todd Bowler spoke about. He was in an area that became that later on, and also we did a lot of CT and intelligence work around potential threat and risks to the community. We had, during that time, we had a crook called Jack Van Tongeren and his cronies that were a nationalist movement, and there was Chinese restaurants being arsoned and things like this. And so, but that was just one of the things that was prominent at the time. So I was in weapons training, and I was with one of my mentors, Dave Parkinson, who's a well-known retired superintendent in WA, but there's another guy that was in charge of protective services, John Watson, who was my mentor became a good mate, and he's passed away now. And I'll always remember the day that he passed away when I was an inspector in the southwest, and he lived down that way. And I went and sat with Laurie, his partner, and he was an absolute legend and a giant for me, and meant so much for me. So I'd been at weapons training, and Parky's had gone to work in that area, and he knew that I wanted to get away from weapons training, have a rest, and I was still kind of attached to ballistics, and I didn't want to be a forensic officer anymore after doing all the weapons and tactics and that. So Parky said, you got to ring Watto. Everyone knew him as Watto, and I made sure I called him Sergeant. So one day we went and had dinner at my in-laws' place, and we now didn't have mobile phones, and Parky gave me his number, and I rang him, and I said, Sarge, Parky said I should give you a call, and he said, you might have a spot there, and he said, do you want to work here? And I said, well, what do you do? And he said, I won't go into details, but if you come, you're going to enjoy it. And I said, yeah, done. So I went there, and it was the best time to be there. It was a time where we had the Pope, John Paul II, came and visited us in 85, and we did the security for him. We had royal visit after royal visit. I remember the Queen coming out, opening Forest Place in the city, but we had other royal visits. We had, my last one was Fergie and Andrew in 88, but we had the America's Cup in 87 at Fremantle. So every man his dog wanted to come there, and I remember the last week of the America's Cup, I was permanently attached to Dennis Connor with one of my colleagues, Russell Tompter, doing security for Dennis Connor with death threats and that. But it was just a period in WA history that was just, everything was happening. But in terms of policing and that happening, it was a place to be. And on top of that, we had the emergency squad, which morphed into the special weapons emergency section. So it was like the TRG, but 2 days a week we did training, 2 days a month. And we used the SAS facilities down at Swanbourne. They allowed us to do that. And we did a camp each year down there as well. But it was the best time to be a copper, best place to be.
So with that, mate, do you do, like, when you got there, did you have to do a selection, or was it just you're assigned, and then but the standard of, like, as you say, you're going down to use the SAS facilities and that, and their standard is what their standard is. It's absolutely crazy. And did you guys have a very high standard as well? Like you treated it very seriously?
Without a doubt, we did. I don't know if we did a formal selection course. One thing I worked out if you were in PSU, you were in the SWES, and that's the way it was. I remember going down to the store and getting all my kit and all that type of stuff, and doing that. But I just loved it. And but I think at the time I was there, apart from the training, all our job was always about looking after the royal visits or the other jobs. Mate, I remember looking after, I don't know if you remember this guy, but Nicholas Cucrescu was the Romanian president who was executed by his own people. Him and his wife got put up against the wall. It's on YouTube if you look at it. Yeah, and right. They put him up. They did a kangaroo court and executed him 6 months or 9 months before. We looked after him in Perth, and he was an arsehole, and so was his wife. And I remember he stayed at Government House, and he said he wanted all the traffic stopped outside while he was in residence, and that ain't going to happen. And then we had to take his wife up to the main shopping mall to get a hat or something, and their bodyguards went in and just started manhandling people out of the shop because no one shops when she shops, and so we had a bit of a to-do about that, and they were just arseholes. But then he went home, and then 6 or 9 months later they got executed up against the wall, and there was some, but we had WA Inc. was happening with a lot of things happening around. We had people coming over to visit WA all the time, and so it was just full on. And the training was just the icing on the cake as well. We did a lot of training all the time, and did a lot of driving training for doing VIP security, and doing all the reverse turns, handbrake turns, and defensive driving and stuff like that. But I can't even recall how many, but there were prominent people we looked after and made sure they were looked after in terms of security. And it was probably a real highlight of not only my career but my life, and working for a person like John Watson, who was assisted by people like Parky, Dave Parkinson, Glenn Miller, Barry Shelton, and one of my best mates, Craig Sweeney, was there as well. And there was only a small group of us, and we brought people in. But then TRG was formulated, and the SWES group kept on going, and to a point when TRG was then ready to take over. We did a selection course because we just wanted to do it because it was fun. We all passed. And I remember we all went in there to the directing staff at the end, and they said, "You can come. We want you to come and be with us, or you can stay where you are. But if you stay where you are, you give up all your access to being part of that type of work." And none of us chose to go with them. We were working. Our team was so tight and so effective. We all chose to stay where we were, and so I did that for a little bit longer. Before I started having kids, or my wife, we had 2 little girls, and then it was time to go because I just wasn't seeing them. It was just too busy.
And mate, that would have been a hard thing because, and I know you and I have spoken about that when we caught up in Kings Park earlier on in the year, and mate, you're living your dream, you're doing the dream jobs, and to have that, the carrot dangled. And I know Todd spoke about TRG and how highly he had the highest regard. It was proud. He was there for 15 years. Brits, as we know, he was part of TRG as well. Like, it would have been hard, mate, to go, no, I'm going to stay here and stay. And mate, good on you for keeping to that decision.
As it wasn't even a decision to make. I know everyone would have said, no, we're staying where we are. It is the best place in the world to work. It was, you have that perfect storm where you have the right people, the right boss, and you just love coming to work. And it was dangerous work. I imagine every state, we all the VIP security people, our nickname were the bullet stoppers, but it was just the best place to work, and we got to do some amazing things and go to some places and stuff like that to look after people. But it was really good. Plus, there was a CT work and the intel work on the side as well, and that really led me to later on in my career. I had a knack about it to plan and devise operations, and I was sought out for that on a couple of times, and so that really held me in good stead. But as I said, I got to work for one of the best coppers as far as I'm concerned in the world. Later in my career, I was referred to as Watto's boy by people that were just jealous dickheads and stuff like that. But I always said that's a badge of honour for me, and he was a terrific fella. And the world's worse off for not having him, and that's yeah.
And mate, mentors. We're going to talk about that when you commission over to be an officer later, and we're going to talk about good leadership and bad leadership and mentors. And you're right, when you find someone that inspires you to be, push to be a better version of yourself, it has a major effect. And mate, as you say, to be called Watto's boy, mate, who you wear it with a badge of honor, mate. Absolutely, and that's what it's all about. And so, mate, you then, so that happens, and then you go regional again, mate. And this is where you're now starting to move up the ranks and you're starting to become a sergeant, and then a senior sergeant, and and you mentioned that you're going regional again, and this is where. Is this where some of the trauma starts to really get to you, or is that a little bit later in your career?
Well, probably a little bit later. The first country spot I went to was Dongra Police Station. For those who don't know where that is, you might know where Geraldton is. It's our major crayfishing town, and Dongra is about 64 kilometres south. And that was my first spot, and I went there as a second in charge. And we had our 2 kids and 2 little girls, and they were only a year apart, toddlers, and probably the greatest achievement though at Dongra was 3 grand finals and 2 premierships playing footy. and that. But I wasn't the best footy player. I played in the first one with the league team and the ones after that and the resis and that. And I quickly worked out I was just a plugger in terms of I just love playing country footy. It's the best, and everywhere I've gone, I've just always played footy and a bit of rugby as well. But going to Dongra, it was a great learning curve for me, and I learned earlier on I wanted to be the sheriff somewhere else, and so we did that. And but I also had a really momentous moment for us in terms of the family. When we were there, we had our little boy Mitch, who's now 34, and we found out after a visit to the hospital when he had a croup attack that Mitch had a few problems, and he suffers from an intellectual disability now, always has. But mate, after that, I just knew that we weren't going to go back to the city. I was going to go work in the country, so I didn't want to get lost to the system. So that had the most impact on me at Dongra. So everywhere I went after that, we picked a place where we could go where that is. And mate, I don't share that for sympathy or whatever, because, mate, I, like every other parent of someone with a disability, he's made me as a man. He's made my daughters the people they are, and my wife and I as people, and we're so blessed to have him as our mentor and stuff like that. So I just put that out there. But I'll tell you what, when I started talking to others about it, I was amazed at how many veterans and first responders are in the same position as me with kids with special needs or things like that. So, and as it turned out, when I went further on in my career, I was a sheriff at the police stations I went to, but Mitch was more well known than I was in the town. And that's so. But I did my apprenticeship, so to speak, as a second in charge there. And then when the opportunity came up for an OIC spot, I took it. And when the boss asked me if I was interested, I said yes. And he said, go home and show your wife where it is. And it's a place called Telfer, which is a gold mine, still a gold mine out from Marble Bar. It's supposedly the hottest place in Australia, but Telfer's just as hot. And it's out in the middle of the desert towards the NT border. And so we went there, and I was the officer in charge there for 2 years before I moved on again. And that was the best fun too, because I grew up in the city, but quite quickly I realised how much country policing I loved, and there we did every 21 days we did a 10-day desert patrol to all the Aboriginal communities and mining camps, and meanwhile I remember sitting there on the side of the campsite, sitting there and we're having a beer or a port after dinner and thinking, remember all those coppers there when there was Central Van free for a job, and that here we are under the stars on the Canning Stock route on the Gary Highway out near the NT border, having a barbie with the NT coppers over the border and on patrol. And it was the best. And I made so many friends, so many people in the communities I went to, which I met later on when I went back to the Pilbara. And my wife still says that Telfer is the best place we ever went to.
And I want to highlight that, mate, because as you said, and I recently had Zach Roth on, my good mate, and he was talking about, he was talking about, NT police, how it's very different. Country policing is very different to city policing. And mate, where you are, you've got, you're remote and you're isolated, and if things go wrong, there's not a lot of support, is there? Like it's like you've got a small team, not a massive team.
Yeah, no, exactly. We in those situations, and we have now these multifunctional facilities in remote locations. They weren't around. I think the most remote police station was Eucla on Nullarbor Plain, and then it would have been us for sure. But and I remember during the wet, we were cut off, and so food and stuff was only being delivered by plane for 3 months of the year and stuff like that. But it really is different. I feel sorry, and I tell everyone, when I used to go to the academy, I used to tell all the young crew, go bush, go up north, because we are the largest policing jurisdiction in the world, and it's so diverse. You can be down in the city and and doing that type of stuff, or you can be up like I was, driving down the Kenning Stock route, or getting involved in out on the desert lands there with various people and stuff like that. That's what I loved it. And NT would have been a lot about that too. They had a lot of places like us as well, and that. But it really is the best part of policing for me. And I just encourage everyone to consider going there at least one. I can't see why you'd go be in the West Australian Police Force and just have a red dot at Perth, and that's the only place you've been to in your career. And that's why I'm very proud about when I do lines to all the places I went to in my family. And I always tell people, but they say, but education. Mate, education is probably better than the cities, because the teachers are in the community and we all know each other, and they want the best for your families and stuff like that. All my girls went to and Mitch went to different schools all over the state, and my girls are all in the mining game, and that they've done really well. And so it's a bit of a myth about we can't go country because of school. No, go out there. It's the best.
There's no limitations, mate. It's the only limitation you put is on yourself, and you're out country. And like you say, mate, there's a lot that just stay in Perth itself, and Perth's it's a big state, mate. Like there's a lot, and I would think, mate, and you mentioned it with Todd, where the old sergeant had grabbed the radio and hauled it away at Central, mate.
Yeah.
You would have been busy. Country policing would have been very busy.
Yeah, it was. And now I'm having flashbacks now to that. And I remember, this is how long ago I was in the job, because the ashtrays in the vans were full of cigarette butts and ash, and the cars all stunk of cigarettes. And that's how long ago it was. And,
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So after a few years, mate, of you're promoting to your officer in charge, and then, mate, in 2010 you become a commissioned officer. And what was because I know that's a big step from going from a senior sergeant to being a commissioned officer. Mate, what was the thought behind commissioning to be an inspector? And did you feel that you could in order change from coming up through the ranks? Well, talk me through this process.
Well, it was a real change, definitely, without a doubt. The best rank for me was senior sergeant in charge of a country police station, both professionally and financially as well, believe it or not. And so I'd gone after Telfer, I went down to Dunsborough and got promoted to senior sergeant, went to Perth Police Station, or Perth City, about 80 coppers. And then I got Chris Dawson, who's now the governor of Western Australia and was the superintendent of Perth. And we had one of the biggest restructures in the policing history of WA when we changed the city. And so we created the Perth Police Station, and he appointed me as a officer in charge here as a senior sergeant and things like that. So I was doing these roles again, and then I went to Katanning in the Wheatbelt for a short period before I went to Newman. And I went to Newman for 5.5 years because we did all of Mitch's primary school, and then we did all of high school at Newman. And that's where I got promoted to commission rank. But I just want to share something with you,
of course, mate,
Adam, and everyone else. Newman in 2001 was the scene of the greatest loss of police life ever in modern day policing history, in all of Australasia, when 4 WA police officers got killed in a police plane crash near the Newman Airport. If you go onto Google Maps now, just to the east of the airport by about 2 kilometres at the most, you can see where the crash site memorial is, and that's how close it was. But that happened in 2001, and I went there at the end of 2004. So I was down serving in Dunsborough as the officer in charge when the crash happened. And the impact that had on this organisation was something else. And because even though we're the biggest policing jurisdiction, it seemed like everyone knew everyone. And I knew the pilot and Don Everett. And Don Everett was in charge of Goldsworthy, which is a mining town near Telfer when I got to Telfer. And he subsequently went and became a police pilot and such. And So when I went there, we decided to do something more because everyone had left except one police officer. There's about 20 coppers there, and they'd all left. They got the opportunity if they wanted to go, to go. And so we started up. First of all, we went out and tried to find the site, and it was overgrown. It took us a couple of weekends, and so we did something about it and created this event that was a ceremony at the site, and then we had a game of rugby that night because being a mining town, we had half Aussies and half Kiwis and in the population. So we created an event, and we called it the Bloody Slow Cup after the Bledisloe Cup. And it was police versus community and game of rugby, but the ceremony was something else. And we'd go out there. We invited the families up because they'd left the police family, so to speak. Mm. And this is a lesson I learned about how important, when we say the blue family, say the blue family, but mean it. And what do you do every day to do that? So we brought the families back and had these ceremonies and community events and stuff like that. To anyone that's been to a police remembrance ceremony, to have the police aircraft come over there, PC-12s, and the very first one we had NT coppers came for it, so they gave us their PC-12, our PC-12. And after that, we had the PC-12 from Perth and Karratha and so forth. We still do a flyover. And to do a flyover at the end of a minute's silence in the middle of the desert where these guys gave up their lives looking after everyone else, the noise, the vibration just rattles your bones. And we created an event, something called Touching the Rock, where at the end of every ceremony, after the banner's taken off back to the edge of the service, we do Touching the Rock under slow march, and our police pipe band compose some music for us, and it's a slow march by every copper on the parade goes up there and puts their hand on the rock, and then the community join in as well. If anyone ever goes to the Pilbara, it's easy to find Asa Coppers. It's not far from town, and you can go out there, and there's a storyboard out there that tells a story of Don, Phil, Gavin and Dave when they went out there. Three of them were based at Newman. They went out at 10 o'clock on Australia Day, 26th of January, and out to Kiwikura, a community out near the NT border, and to deal with an incident out there. They dealt with it. They came back, and about 10 o'clock, like a lot of country coppers would know, when the plane's coming back, they call you up on the police radio and say, we're about 15 minutes out, send some cars out to the airport. So 2 cars went out there. And then just after 10 o'clock, they've seen the plane come over. And then from what they heard, it got into difficulty and it's fallen from the sky and it's crashed. There was no explosion, no fire, so they knew the general direction. Half the town, once they found out about half the town was out there just driving around in the bush. And it was the officer in charge that found, with the SES manager, that found the plane about 4 o'clock the next morning. Everyone had been killed on impact. And got to say, I went there a couple of years after that, and it was still very, very raw to everyone there. And subsequently, we'd still go there each year. And for 20 years, Police Legacy, of which I became a board member for about 17 years because of my experience there, did the event. And for the first time, the community took it over this year. And so it's still going. And so we do it in October because in the wet season, you might not be able to get out to the crash site. And also we had to wait till the AFL season was over because all of us were Kiwis and Aussies were playing AFL, and we had to do it before the wet season. So it's in October, third weekend in October. But even if you're just driving up there, you can get the mud map how to get there. It's really easy, but it's when you go out there and stand upon the ground in which the thing happened. The plane's buried there. They didn't take it away. They buried it there, and there's very moving words written about those 4 guys. You can Google it. But so I tell everyone about wherever you are for any police remembrance ceremony, touch the rock. When I walked out of my office on the 20th of December last year at Bunbury, I did a march off there, and I said, before I do anything, I'm just going to go over and touch the rock because it's the last time I'm going to touch the rock in uniform with my medals on and stuff like that. So, mate, I'm starting to get a little bit of...
Of course, mate, take your time. Take your time, mate.
So it's so I became really close friends with all the families and as did all my colleagues, and it means so much. So when we talk Blue Family, I always ask the question, what are you doing about it? what do you go to a remembrance ceremony, whether you're working or not? Do you actually help your legacy organisation with any events they're doing and stuff like that? It's so important, because I know that the 4 families that we helped, and other ones as well from other events, they're still part of us, and that was the thing they feared, was they left us and that was going to be it, but they're still part of it, and they have so much joy from other coppers just being there for them still all this time after it. And so
And
that was
yeah, mate, and mate, I thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that, mate, because I know you and I, you and I spoke about that tragedy when we caught up in Kings Park, and I know it cut you up then, and it still cuts you up, mate. And mate, any loss of anyone, whether it be, from the plane crash, or whether, police, choose to end their life, or it's tragic. It's tragic for for the Blue family, and it's, mate, I say it to anyone, is that police, fire, ambulance, for veterans, mate, you're doing a job to protect and serve. And we recently had it here, mate, where there was a firefighter killed at a fire that I was at a couple of weeks ago, and mate, it affects you. I didn't even know the guy, but it still affects you, because as you know, mate, and every first responder knows, that when you go out, you don't know if you're coming back. It's the danger of just how dangerous. And you said it at the start of the podcast, mate, where when you looked at ballistics and went, oh God, like that this is a bit of a dangerous job, and and what you're exposed to. And you're right, mate. It affects death, and especially going and doing a job, and they were so close to so close to safety, and they made the ultimate sacrifice. And that, mate, that's why National Police Remembrance Day is a special day, mate. It really is, the
yeah.
29th of September every year. And, if you can get out, even if you're not a police officer, get out and, go to Canberra and actually see the National Memorial. And I've been there, mate, many, many times. And the names that are there, mate, that have made the ultimate sacrifice, to protect and serve us, mate, and the greatest, that's the greatest loss for police officers.
It is. It is. And well said. I want to shout out too to our Victorian counterparts too, because when I said that WA suffered the most significant loss, only a couple of years ago now, they lost their 4 colleagues on the highway with the truck crash and that. So they went through something significant. Any loss is significant, but to lose 4 people at one go, but even put it into a regional environment. Imagine being the OIC. I can't imagine what it was like.
Mm.
So now you're dealing with 4 families in the town, whilst all the crazy chaos is happening about questions, radio calls, phone calls, and everything like that. And so I can only imagine what that was like. But it's so important, that people need to actually, as I said, this comes back to what is the organisation really about for us. And if we take away all the other crap or whatever, it's about being there for each other. And doesn't matter who you are or what rank or what level you are, but do something to help others, because, like you said, we don't think we're going to not come back. And if you don't come back, I just feel better knowing that people will do what I did to help others for Helen and my kids. So so important. And so that was a big part.
And you mentioned, mate, you mentioned the Victorian 4 that were killed on the highway tragically. I'm actually talking to the brother of one of the police officers that was killed. He's a police officer himself, and he's actually coming on the podcast to talk about that day and his own service. And I've been speaking to him, and he's actually coming on the podcast. So it's mate, and you got to go back before that, where go back to Ned Kelly days when the police, 3 police police were, so it happens, mate. It happens a lot. And, we were only talking, and we were only talking off air before we started with what happened in Bondi. And, the police copped a lot of criticism and and we're going to, we probably will talk about that a little bit further down the track, actually, and we'll bring Bondi into that and your thoughts around, that criticism and armchair strategists that have never walked a day or never had had a dangerous day in their life. So we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But mate, talk me through the role of the because you're one of the very first commissioned officers that I've had on the podcast. So what for the civilian listener out there, how does the role change? Because I'm gathering that do you still get out on the beat with the guys on the ground, or how does the role change?
Well, it changed a bit. Basically, I did 5.5 years as senior sergeant, and then I went to Broome, the Kimberley district, and because I like to think my strengths were around dealing with issues around of national significance around alcohol and violence, and there was a lot when I was up in Newman. But I've got to say, I think I was successful in my application for commissioner rank because I worked with a group of people, not only police at Newman, that were the first 3 months I was there, we had 2 homicides involving alcohol and domestic violence, and we had other incidents happen there. But so we actually created a really effective liquor accord where we kept people accountable. So if you stuffed up involving alcohol, you weren't allowed in any premises, whether it be a golf club, a footy club, anywhere that sold alcohol. You went to go there and things like that. But there was other things we did with the liquor accord. But we did community patrols. We had a thing called with the Muddy people up there. They brought up the logo and called it the Respect Project, where I had a police officer and working with elders we got a funding to get a troopy and so we'd go around talking to people and they'd give them lifts. So people didn't come to the justice system because of the early intervention and stuff like that. And so we did all these good things. Also, the banned drinker register that's around a lot now. I'm really proud of the fact that Newman put that up. They didn't go for it because there was issues in the Kimberley that they wanted to address first. But we brought up the takeaway management system using banned drinker register and stuff like that. And but everyone wanted to do it, including the mining community, the Aboriginal community, the liquor industry, and everyone was on board with it because they could see the pain. But anyway, so as a result of that, I think it was fortunate then that I put in for commission rank and I was able to win a spot and I went from inspector. Now, I can say this type of stuff because by the time this plays, I'm out of the job and stuff like that. But I don't know if it's the same for other jurisdictions, but there's a saying we have, when you're a senior sergeant, you're king of the shits. When you're an inspector, you're the shit of the kings. And that's kind of like what I felt like. And after a while, and you do get to, I went to the Kimberley, I looked after, I think, the West Kimberley first. So on the coastal side, Broome and Derby and
beautiful spots.
And Bidjadanga and a couple other spots. And then the second year I went and looked after the East Kimberley, like over near the border, Kununurra and Columbaroo and stuff like that. So I got to, and because I was a country copper, I loved going out and spending time away and just mixing with the OICs and the crew as well. So that brought a lot of joy. But I quickly worked out that it gave me the thirst to be a superintendent, a district superintendent, because that's all I wanted to get to, because I knew that I wasn't going to go back to Perth because I wanted to stay in the country with my young bloke, and you got to go back to Perth to go higher in. So because you're not the sheriff when you're inspector, you're kind of like working for a sheriff. And so, but it was really enjoyable. And when I was there, we had a lot of James Price Point protests around the gas exploration and protests, and divided a town, divided Broome and stuff like that. And so it was very busy. And as I said, I did a lot more traveling and just enjoying the lifestyle and where we lived. And it was great. Those who have been to Broome, it's great 6 months of the year, the weather, but 6 months a year, it's really, I used to feel sorry for the young connies that during the wet season, I'd go from my air-conditioned house in my air-conditioned car to my air-conditioned office, and I'd be watching them coming back during the wet season, and they'd be drenched, and because then we started wearing body art or wearing vests and stuff like this, and so would have been a bit uncomfortable, but it was pretty busy place, but it was very enjoyable. But I worked out. I enjoyed I took to being a commissioned officer okay. Mm. The only thing I didn't like about it too is that once you put the pips on your shoulder, people see you as the enemy. And we were talking off camera before about organisational culture and about, our union is strength and unity. That's their catch cry. But there's not a lot sometimes because we've just kind of like developed and drilled into people that once you become a boss, that's it. You're no longer one of the boys, that type of thing. And so I didn't like that. It was kind of like you were, 1 minute you were just one of the crew and getting in there, and then now you're on the outer and stuff like that. That's the side of being a commissioned officer I don't like. But the good ones, and, I talked about John Watson. The other good one I like is Mick Sutherland. And Mick Sutherland's a retired, he got to the rank of commander, but he was really good. And he was my superintendent in the Kimberley for a while and down for a short time in the Southwest as well. But I worked out quickly about being a good, decent person. Doesn't matter what rank you are, including a higher rank. That's what's really important. That's what people see and respond to. So I spent a couple of years up there, and then I came back. I went to the Southwest, back down to Bunbury, and I was there for 4 years and had an absolute ball. And so we did all the protest activity in the Kimberley, and then we had logging protests and some OMCG activity that we dealt with really, really well. But once again, the Southwest, it just seems to be a bit of a shit magnet for events and whether it be crime or emergencies, bushfires and all that type of thing. So, but I was really blessed to have a good team to work with, but good managers at police stations and good crew. So.
And I want to touch on leadership. I have a real passion for it, and so do you. And I want to touch on that leadership can be a lonely road, mate, and you're in between, as you said, you're in between your superintendent and you're in between the senior sergeant. So you're the meat in the sandwich. You're trying to, please and be good to your boss up above, and then the senior sergeant below you. So how did you study leadership? Could you take from being when you were a senior sergeant? Could you take that across to being, a commissioned an inspector, or how did you have mentors, or how did you go about that leadership? Going from that senior sergeant role into the commissioned inspector role?
I think I had some good mentors. Mate, I love naming people because I don't think we name people on podcasts enough. I've said about John Watson, and Mick Sutherland's a really good one. And you just got to Google Mick Sutherland, WA Police, and you'll see all the stuff he's done. But I worked out as an inspector, as a commissioned officer, you had to have more of a strategic focus on stuff. You had to do that because when I was a sergeant or a senior sergeant, you're fighting for what you think. You're more operational or tactical thinking. No, we should be doing this. And then I worked out that, wait a sec, there's a reason why we're doing this as an inspector. So I learned about the strategic considerations, but the beauty again is about how you communicate that, because the really good communicators about that, how do you translate that strategic intent into why, not only what needs to be done, but why we're doing it that way. And so I think that's a lesson for me and a lesson for anyone else is once you get the pips, work out the why, but more importantly, work out how you communicate that to your troops, because it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And there's a thing I use sometimes about people don't believe the message if they don't believe the messenger. And that's comes to me about why it's so important for that. And the other thing is too, I learned is just to be able to say no. Like a lot of people, when you become a new boss at a lower rank even or something like that, you want everyone to like you, you want everyone to please you. And so learning to say no with rationale is an important skill for any leader. There's a really good quote that I use in my leadership sessions, attributed to Steve Jobs, about if you want to make everyone happy, don't be a leader, sell ice cream. And, so that to me it was so important, because I used to say yes far too much. Boss, I need the weekend off, but I say, okay, who have you got to work it? Oh, I haven't got anyone, but I really need it off. Oh, okay, I'll take you. Sometimes I work double shifts, or I change my annual leave without telling Helen, and that had caused problems because I was a yes man. And so being a leader at any rank, particularly early on, is that ability to say no with rationale to someone is really, really important. But particularly when you become a higher rank, you've got to start having that strategic focus. It's not just about locking up crooks, and that it's important, but you've got to, if the people above you are going a particular direction, we have to sell it. And one thing I think is really important too, and I used to say to people, if we're going to do something that is not well liked about what we're going to do, don't sell it as we're doing this because the boss wants it. It's coming from you, so let that come from you, rather than just put it all back on someone else because you don't want them to not like you, type thing. So I don't know if that makes sense, but
it does. Yeah. And we were talking off air, mate, of the standards you walk past is the standards you accept, and that and I know it too, especially stepping into leadership. It can be very, very, it can be very lonely, mate, and it can be. And I'm always a believer, mate, and I know there'll be people out there that will absolutely tear shreds off me for saying this, but you can grow into a leadership role. I absolutely believe you can you can develop. Every single one of us, Geoff, we can be leaders, and some people are better than others, and you've seen many bad leaders, so have I. I've seen many good leaders, and you and I have spoken off air of some of the leaders that I look at that aren't good leaders at all. They're great managers, but as leaders, they're not good leaders. But there are great managers, and there's a difference between management and leadership. They're two different. They are two different categories.
Yeah, and I think you hit something else there too that's really important to me, as is around when you have to change and you have to grow in a certain area. I came to recognise there's not a single person in the world, and or in your organisation or in your team, there's not a single person right now, including yourself, that doesn't want to change something about themselves as a person or as a leader. And so the good leaders know that, and they're the ones that are able to do that. So I just encourage everyone that, before we throw stones and stuff like that, when I didn't become, I applied for superintendent a couple of times, and I was almost swore.
No, you're right, mate. You can go for it.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to chuck a couple in there now.
Go for it, mate. No, you're more than welcome to, mate. Go for it.
And So I got to inspector on my first go, and because I was just operational and stuff like that, and then when it got time to go to the next rank as superintendent, I found myself really wanting, and it came back to the imposter syndrome, and I didn't think that I must be doing something wrong, or I'm not quite up to their level and stuff like that. When I went to my first interview, the question might have been something like, with the changes coming, what do you see as the main things that? And I just say something like, it's about identifying key strategic stakeholders and partners with mutually beneficial. And then I'd go home that I wouldn't sleep because I'd hate embarrassing myself. And I say, you fucking idiot! What do you? Why'd you say that for? But I didn't have that knack of doing that, and so I worked out. And then when I didn't get up, and people would know my background and what I'd done, and they'd ring you and say, Stewie, how the hell did they get up, or did she get up? Did he get up? You're much better cop. And I'd be ashamedly, I'd say, yeah, it's bullshit. The system is. And then I'd say, that was me. That was all on me. And this is a thing that people don't do. When stuff happens to them or is happening in the team, there's one crucial crucial question they need to ask themselves, and that's what's your part in the mess. Because I'd hang up the phone. I knew that I wasn't good enough to get up. And this is the other thing about people that criticise people that they don't think deserve to get up there. You know what? They've got aspirations. They've got mortgages. They've got families and stuff like that. How good is it that they got through? But we see our default position when we don't get what we want. It's particularly around promotion and deployments of choice. It's not my fault. It's all their fault. Why are they picking those people? We just got to hold up the mirror a bit more. And that's what I did in 2015. I came to the end of my 4 years as an inspector, and we have to go after. That's even probably a little bit too long, but we had to go, and I wasn't going to go back to Perth. And an opportunity came to, and there might be a lot of people on that listen to your podcast that have been to the Australian Institute of Police Management. Mm-hmm. And I'd been there when I was in the Kimberley. I went there for the 3-week program. And like everyone else, I said, that was the best thing I've ever done. You do some academic writing, but it's not academic. It's all about you. We're starting to look at ourselves and so and an opportunity came up to go there for a 12-month deployment as a visiting fellow. Back then, we don't do it now, I don't think, but every 3 years we send a commissioned officer over there. And I rang up Phil Shepherd, who's another name I love saying because he did so much for me, and I hope he hears this because I've told him how much he helped me. But I remember ringing him and said, Phil, his name's Shep, and I said, Shep, you probably don't remember. He said he did, but I said, I'm interested, but I'm not an academic. And he said, Stuart, it's not about being an academic if you come here. But so I ended up winning the job over there, which suited the family because I didn't go back to Perth. Mitch could stay where he was in Dunsborough as well with Helen and my youngest daughter at the time, and they came over. I got a fully furnished apartment in Manly for 12 months, and I got to go there for 12 months and be a visiting fellow. And they came over every school holiday, so it was a great time for the family. But for the first time, I held up the mirror. I was this strong operational officer and could do all that type of stuff and whatever, but I had trouble just progressing, and I couldn't work out why. But I wasn't dumb enough to think that it was someone else. I knew it was me. And at the end of that, I worked out what it is, or what I'm still working it out, but I was in a much better position. So when I did my 12 months, and then I went back home, and I went to the academy for 12 months. That was a bit of payback for going to the college, and loved going there and just seeing the young people, what they're going through now at the academy and things like that. But when I was over there, they asked me if I wanted to do my Masters of Leadership at the Geoff Stewart University, where other people had. And being a good student from Maribooka High School who failed every single subject and any diplomas I got by recognised prior learning, I'd said, I just can't do that. And so I had to do something, though. And so I created a newsletter that I just sent back to my colleagues back in WA saying, hey, this is what we're doing this month. What do you reckon? And that kind of kept morphing into something a bit more polished than that. And so I did that. And when I got back, I started doing coffee meetings where we'd sit around and talk about the topic of the newsletter and stuff like that. And the newsletter started going out a bit global, and people said, I'd love to be at the coffee meeting and stuff like that. And I'd do them around the suburbs, and I had some people that had helped me do them as well. And then COVID came along, and I couldn't do the coffee meetings, but it wasn't bad because then I could do online conversations, which I'm still doing to this day, as you know.
You are, yeah, because I've appeared on. I've actually appeared on as a guest.
Yeah. So you know what? And this is going to go deep and meaningful for a moment.
Course,
so when I was in college, towards the end, about 3/4 of the way through, I finally worked out it was all me, and I'm not going to start or continue to blame other people or whatever. And one thing I haven't shared so far online, I've shared with you offline, is that when I was a senior sergeant, but when I got promoted to commissioned officer, I got held accountable for something that I was charged with departmentally. And it wasn't criminal, it wasn't inappropriate activity or whatever, but it was something that happened on my watch at my station. And subsequently an audit was done statewide that found out it was being done around the state. But I copped a fairly decent whack on it. and it resulted in me attending a hearing and held by the Deputy Commissioner, who was Chris Dawson at the time. And I just want to say again, here's another person who's had a massive impact on me, Chris Dawson. He was my superintendent when I was in charge of Perth. He became our deputy, and he had a lot to do with legacy too, very big on legacy and that. But he, at the end of the hearing, he turned off the tape and shook my hand and said, "Stewie, don't worry about it, onwards and upwards." And so that's what I wanted to do. But about 3/4 of the way through my college experience, I showed my defaulter sheet. And at the start of the day, when people have gone to the AIPM would remember the sessions, with the reflection sessions, and I put that up. And it was my defaulter telling me that I didn't manage or supervise well in an area of this thing. So I put that up there, and it's because it finally hit me. And I said, I finally come to the position today where I take ownership for the stuff. And so from that day on, I worked out I'm not going to blame anyone else. If things don't go well for me, and there's been other challenges in the past, but nothing like that, I actually asked a question myself: what's my part of the mess? And there's always going to be something, because there's not a single person who doesn't want to change something about themselves or whatever. So if you ever get challenged by something significant, ask that question, but don't hold other people accountable, or don't put blame on them. They might deserve some of it, but you know what, if we're all honest with ourselves and stuff like that. And one other thing while I think about it, I just want to make this point too, to all the parents and caregivers of family members with disabilities or challenges and stuff like that. I've seen that. I don't know if it's the same for others. I think it might be, because I know some people. I've been faced with some significant challenges in this job, seen some really crazy things and dealt with some crazy things, been held accountable. But I got through it, and I reckon it's because nothing in this job, including what I just talked about, compares in any way, shape or form to the stress or challenges of being a parent or a caregiver with someone. Nothing. And I reckon that's why I'm a better copper, a better person, because that's at work. If it happens, it happens. We'll get on with it or whatever. But it's nothing compared to the challenges you face in your own life space. I don't know I hope I've explained that.
Yeah,
well enough.
You have, mate, and I want to highlight here too that in 2018 you were promoted to superintendent, which you finally got that promotion after being knocked back. Couple of setbacks, mate, and I know there was a couple, and good perseverance for you to become a superintendent. And it leads me into my next question of where I want to talk. And you know, this is where you became a superintendent. This is a great segue, is to your role changes as a superintendent. You're not an inspector now. You're a superintendent, so you're a higher rank. Mate, and you know, you and I have spoken about this off air, so you know this question that I'm about to. It's a loaded question, and that's why I wanted to get you on to talk about it, because I've had so many police veterans on the podcast, mate, that have said the top brass of and you said it off air beautifully, and I will bring that in of what you said. The answer was absolutely brilliant, and so many police at the coalface, mate, feel that the bosses, there's disconnect from being that they're too focused on the upper echelons of, you know, management and, you know, the next progression of promotion, and they've forgotten what it's like for the guys on the ground at the coalface. Mate, you're the perfect what more can be done to bridge that the gap that seems to be, that is felt from the guys on the ground? But and I understand, and you said it so well, that there's two sides to this story. There's not just the guys on the ground, there's your side as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. One thing I want to make it really, really clear: in all my times of service, particularly at commissioned rank, I've never been party to or seen or heard of commissioned officers sitting around saying, how can we fuck it up for everyone else? How can we make it really, really hard? We've got to screw them with what we want. I've never seen that. the people that actually work in our organisations, they're there because they want to make a difference or whatever. If they don't make a difference, it's just because they need help in terms of development or whatever, or we need to be better at how we communicate that. And everyone, as I said, everyone's got a skin in the game. So if it's not going that well, ask yourself what's your part of the mess. What do you do in terms of communicating? Have you ever rang up a deputy commissioner or an assistant commissioner and say, boss, can I come have a coffee with you? I'd like to talk to you about it. I mean, bosses love what I've seen too, and particularly our current regime here. They love contact from other people. But do people do that? Or do they just sit around in crib rooms and say, oh, the job's fucked? And so I hate that. And I've got to say, I hate that term, the job's fucked. Because we've all got skin in the game. If we're all responsible for the culture that we have, and what are we doing? As I said, I'll make it really clear again. No one sits there and works out today's a day. What are we going to do to screw everyone over and stuff like that? They're not about that. They might bring in things that don't work or whatever, but we need to help each other understand why or whatever. Our current commissioner, Cole Blanche, encourages people to send him emails and ask questions, and he even does video reports back online to people that, oh, these are the questions I've got asked. I've got to tell you, this is why we're doing it this way or whatever. This is what we need to do, but we've got to stop putting blinkers on and stuff like that. And you know, I know everything, and this is fucked. And you just, it's so important for any culture to grow in a good way is to do it like that. Do it in a way that you're asking the questions or sharing information, but don't be one of those doom and gloomers. Because one thing I know about doom and gloomers, they seem to grow, they stick together and stuff like that. And I said before, Adam, I can't think of, on one hand, I can't even think of really bad leaders that I've worked for myself, but I can think I need a few more hands to think of the people that made it really hard on the floor and the naysayers and stuff like that. You know, we talk about the armchair critics, and I see some of the comments and that people put on there, and when they do, and I see who it is, I think, really, I didn't really picture you as a super cop there, but I'm not going to go on there and say that because it's not going to help. But we've just got to get better at, you know, being good, decent people to each other. If we want to change culture, that's what we need to do. And
I think, sorry to cut you off, mate. I know something that you, and I know you personally, mate. You are a very approachable person. Like, if there was and I can tell as you care for your troops, and mate, your door would have always been open for your troops to come in and say, hey, Geoff, we're not, what are we doing here? Like, we don't, the mission that we're trying to achieve is not, and I know that from you, and you said it off air beautifully. You got to stop eating your own.
Yeah.
Like,
Mate, that's my biggest bitch, and we spoke about that a bit. The worst thing that we do in first responder, and maybe veterans as well, but certainly first responder, we eat our own, and we've got to stop doing that. And, the thing that I picked up looking at leadership and things like that, there's this US military term called be, know, do. And I use it a lot now. And the know is easy. It's the knowledge. It's about learning the stuff and things like the do is a practical application. They're things we can learn and stuff like that. But where people succeed is about being the be. It's about being themselves, leading with heart, living with heart, and being the best version of yourself. And we spoke before about values. We've all got organisational values. WA Police is duty, teamwork, integrity, and care. And everyone's got organisational values. And I always say, well, okay, if we've got these values, then why do we have people transgress with serious things? We've had a copper charged with sex assaults. We've had other coppers charged with assault, inappropriate use of computers, stealing. And then we have, inappropriate activity in the workplace through sexual harassment or intimidation and stuff like that. But wait a sec, we've got organisational values. Why aren't they stopping it? Because people aren't being themselves, being the true version of themselves. So I always say, put your personal values before your organisational values. When you do that, you create the best team environment, and you give more ability to change cultures in organisations by doing that. So I just tell everyone, if they're really important and you need to know them and adopt them, but you know what? put more importance on being the best version of yourself.
Mm.
And so when you see it, and I think you've already said it once about the standard you walk past is the standard you accept, when you actually hear someone in the crib room, the really brave ones who who say something about people when they're not there and stuff like that, do we pull them up and saying, hey, cut it out?
Yep.
Dickhead, it's not going to help the situation. That's what we have to do. So I tell people about be you, but also what's your mantra? What's important to you? And what I worked out was about my mantra was exceptional, ethical, and brave. So when I adopted that and being the superintendent, I could put that in the district, and I had it up on my boardroom wall as well for the underneath the organisational ones. But so when I spoke to people, I said, I want you to be the best version of yourself. I want you to adopt the organisational values, but I want you to be more than that. To do that, be you. And, the ones that I choose are exceptional because I want you to do the best job. Near enough's not good enough. It's really important we do it that way. Ethical goes without saying. We do the right thing for the right reason or whatever. But the brave is so important. Now, brave, and I'm not only talking about showing courage, running into burning buildings and such and rescuing people. That's really important, but brave in the workplace. The biggest thing I hate seeing is when we have coppers that talk to and treat crooks better than they talk to and treat colleagues. And this comes back to we eat our own. So if you're having challenges or you're seeing challenges in the workplace, what's your part in the mess? Are you doing something about it? How many times have you actually, as I said before, rung and asked to speak to someone about it? How many times have you used the portals in your organisation to send information through and things like that? They're the little things. They're the 1%ers that can make a difference. But above everything else, if you see it happening in your workplace, are you doing something or are you just walking past it? And that's a standard we accept.
And I love what you just said there with bravery. It's that moral courage too to call someone out and say, hey, we don't accept that. And okay, you might cop a bit of flack from your colleagues, but I know myself personally, mate, I'd rather stand side by side with someone who is morally going to call out bad behaviour than allow it to continue. And as you know, mate, and so do I, workplaces, if you're in a negative workspace, it is so draining to go to a negative workplace. And I had it where in the end, mate, I started to get disgruntled with the organisation, with the people that I was working with, because I was in that culture of I was getting dragged down to that negativity, and in the end, mate, I looked at my own mental health and I went, you know what? If you don't like it, leave. Like, if it's not going to change and you can't see that you're going for promotion, and you get knocked back, or it's not going to, just, you've got the option. You don't have the golden handcuffs around you, or if you're in the other first responder organizations, if it's not meant to be, move on. Find something else, mate. And as you said, don't stay in a job for 20 years, 25 years, and then go, the job's fucked when you get out of it. Like, you have the power to change and make change.
Exactly, mate. Yeah, and you're only on this planet once, so why would you put yourself through that? Because you not only put yourself through it, you take it home and you put your family through it as well. And that's when it becomes really messy and really hard, and that leads to so many other issues. So, yeah, but I mean, and this isn't pie in the sky stuff. We're talking about your personal well-being, the well-being of your family, the well-being of your colleague, the well-being of your team. Why wouldn't we want to do this? So we've just got to knock it out. We've got to stop eating our own sometimes, and things like that. But it's so important.
And like 100% agree with you that that's the thing about Australia, mate, is we're called the lucky country, mate, and it is an absolute privilege to, be born into this country where you and I both live. We live in such a, it is a beautiful country, but the one thing I hate, and I've got a mate he's an Australian he's an actor and lives in the US, and he said, I hate coming home to tall poppy syndrome and being pulled down for trying to better yourself. And, that's something in Australia that we seem to really, as you say, eat your own, where if you want to be better, if you want to progress and get that promotion or you move on to something bigger and better, it's we seem to want to pull people back. Oh, you can't be better than me, Stewie, because
Yeah,
I got to pull you back to me. And that's the one thing I hate in Australia is tall poppy syndrome.
yeah, and you know what? It's normal too because we're all humans and things like that. But the good humans are the ones that are able to do something about it. Because I like doing the exercise. If we ask a group in a classroom, tell us the best leader you've ever worked for and why, and they'll tell you who they are and they'll tell you the reasons why they were so good. And it's always going to come down to the really good human skills every single time. No one's ever going to say, "Oh, it's because they're a pencil neck and they've got all they know all
Yeah,
the technical stuff." They're
that's
going to
right.
say the way they actually looked after people, the way they cared for people, the way and the really good ones do it, because when the shit hits a fan, they don't have to look over their shoulder. People are just have confidence in that they're going to be okay because we've been shown the way.
Mm.
And the way they do is show people how to be good, decent people. And that's why I say people like me, the three biggest influences I've had is John Watson, Chris Dawson, and Mick Sullivan. Mick Sullivan, I remember telling him when I got made up or to superintendent, because I went back to the Southwest just for 6 months when I did. And I told him, mate, I always looked at things. If I had a problem, my question would be slightly different to what's my part in the mess. I'd say, what would Mick do? What would Mick do? Because he's one that I rate that just is able to relate to people and they relate to him.
Mm.
And that's all we got to change. Any problem that we have in any workforce, any team or whatever, can be fixed by just being better humans to each other.
And
And
being
yeah,
open, mate. And
yeah,
writing, like, there's an old saying, mate, that if you look at a problem, you can't you might be able to solve a problem, but if you write the problem down, you've solved
yeah,
50% of the problem because you've written it down. Like,
yeah,
be open and honest, and
yeah.
and that's the yeah, it's the like what we're talking about, mate. It's not rocket science. But
No,
sometimes
no,
it's forgotten. And
yeah.
mate, you talk about, you joined the job, in 48 years ago, which is just, mate, that's a long time
I
in
know.
policing.
I only look 27. I know.
Yeah, I know you do, mate. Like, you're a good-looking rooster like me, and no, I've only got a head for radio. Trust me, I've been on national TV, but yeah. Anyway, mate, policing when you join, and policing has evolved and it's changed, and it's what it is now. Do you believe now, and you can say this as you're leaving the job, that policing has evolved to what it is? Do you believe we're going in the right direction, or do you hope that it swings back a little bit to how it was when you first joined?
No, look, I don't want to see it swing back because, mate, I think it's going the right direction, and because it's totally different to when I joined and others joined and stuff like that. And one thing that is pointless in doing is saying, "Oh, it'll never be the same when we were and it was better back then." It never will be the same, but the the kids, or I say the kids, but we have people that are a lot older joining now too, but they're dealing with stuff that we never dealt with, and a lot more. They're carrying around probably 8, 10 kilos sometimes of equipment with us. Like I said, I just had a pair of handcuffs and a baton and stuff like that. The job has evolved so much. It has to keep evolving with the current environment, not only in the town, in the country, but the world as well. And we saw about Bondi and stuff like that. So, mate, no, I'm comfortable. I've just got so much admiration for the people who do. I'm not going to be one of those people when I finally retire and say, "Oh, we had the best time." I reckon I had the best time in the job. I reckon the people before me said that, and I reckon the people after me have said that as well. And why shouldn't they? Because they're getting experience the best job in the world. And I've touched on this before, Adam, with you as well. And I listened to Zach. I was captivated by your podcast with Zach. But one thing that he said at the end that didn't really resonate with me was he said at the end of the day, it's just a job. It's not a job. I feel sorry for every single person in the world that doesn't wear a blue shirt. I have got and had the best job in the world, and I've taken some kicks and stuff like that. I wouldn't change anything for anything. It was never a job for me. It was a vocation, and I loved it. I loved it and still do. But I'm glad I've had my time, and I'm going to go too. But it's not just a job. So whatever you do, how do you make it so happy and exciting every day? What is it? If you're not looking forward to it every day, and that, then maybe it is a job, and it's time to do something else. But I just want to make that point. It's just I generally feel sorry for anyone that doesn't get to experience what I've experienced and wear the blue shirt and that. But it's certainly evolving the way it should do. And mate, they'll be flying spacecraft in a few years, and
well, mate, I've heard now that they're going to bring AI in to help, and in policing. So mate, you know, in the future we could see the Jetsons sort of spacecraft.
Exactly.
So, but
Exactly.
I think and I think to with what Zach said, and I mate, it was a real honour to have him on and do his podcast. He says it as well. Like, he did say, yes, it is a job, but he also said it is the most honourable job that you could ever do. And he said if the shit hadn't happened to him, he would still be a police officer. Like, he said it was the greatest. It was the greatest job that he ever had. And he'd been in the army and a police officer.
Yeah.
So it is a great calling. And mate, I know it as a firefighter. It is a great job, and you do when you can. When you can help someone, mate, and you know exactly what I'm saying, and every first responder who listens to this podcast knows this. When you can help someone on their worst day of their life, there is no greater reward than, and I know it for myself, when we save a house and a complete stranger gives me a hug and says thank you for you've saved my house. Mate, there's no greater feeling. I absolutely, for me, and with all the trauma, all the shit that you see, and all the politics that go on with the job, mate, at the end of the day, when we break it down, what do we do as first responders? We are there to protect and serve and help our communities, and mate, if you break down, take away all the other crap, it all comes back to service.
And such a noble service thing to do too. That's what I look at anyone that is a first responder. I just want to make the disclaimer, not having a crack at Zach. I was captivated by his story, and I'm so glad I got to hear it. And it was just, and he's got every reason maybe to think differently to me, every reason in the world. But just that, mate, I've never looked at service in WA Police as a job. Sometimes I couldn't believe they were paying me. And I've kept that all the way through, as I said, amongst some challenges and stuff like that. And I've got to say, mate, and just to finish off on this bit, when I went back and did my superintendent interview after I did some soul searching and just recognising I already knew what I had to change. But once I did that, my very first interview, I think the question was like, what are the key deliverables for a superintendent in WA Police Force? And my response was something like, I could talk about right people, right place at the right time, or fiscal responsibility, but it needs leadership, true leadership, and this is what I reckon it is. And I just went into that, and that got me through. And I walked out. I didn't walk out jumping in the air or whatever, but I just knew I finally said what I've been feeling and stuff like that. And obviously it resonated a bit with the panel or something like that. So,
And mate, I know that, as you say, with you, it couple of attempts, and there's a question that I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to save what I'm about to say. I'll save that for just a little bit later. But mate, on the 4th of January 2026, you will be calling time on your career, a career that, as I've said, has spanned 48 years. Most veterans and first responders that I've interviewed, and I've nearly done 200 of these now, they all struggle with transition. How do you think you'll cope with transitioning what has been your calling for the last 48 years? What have you got in place, and have you mentally prepared yourself that you're coming to the end?
I think I have. I had this same conversation with Helen a little while ago, only a couple of weeks ago, and she said, "Hey," because last week I took my boxes of uniforms up to Perth and a laptop and a work phone and all that, and I didn't worry about it at all. Look, I walked out last December, and I've been burning up leave since then. But you know, when you're at work and you're on leave and you're going back to work next week, and you think, "Oh shit, I've got that meeting on Monday. I've got to do that, and I've got to start thinking about that." My head, and I've always been an early riser to work, and it didn't matter if I was living next door. I was always there at 6 a.m. because I wanted to get shit done and stuff like that. But my head, just told me, "Stewie, that's it, it's over." And straight away, I started sleeping better. I'm healthier. I've always been a happy type of dude, and that, but I think I'm happier as well. But I'm healthier, and that because I'm not attached to one of those.
Yeah, I can see you're not attached to your phone.
yeah. So I'm better. I haven't had a problem. I'm still doing the leadership, as you know. I'm still doing the newsletters and talking to people from all around the world. But that to me is just, I love doing that because I just love having chats like this. But I'm not being held. That's the only thing I'm going to be doing. But mate, I've got our first granddaughter now, little Skylar, and I just love being with my kids and stuff like that. And and that's really important for me because I haven't done that. When I was working in protective services, it was just work, and I had to leave to be with my kids. And mate, when I was in charge of Dunsborough, and like I said, so much shit happened down here, I left there, transferred, promoted to senior sergeant, went to Perth, and I'd been there for nearly 9 years. And my daughters were 13 and 14 then. And when I came, I lived with mum and dad running Perth Police Station, and I came back on the weekend. The first weekend, I took my daughters down to get an ice cream, and my oldest one, who was 14, said, "Dad, I've seen you more this weekend than I saw you in 9 years." And so that was a real kick. But that's why, yeah. So I'm just loving life, just being there with my kids who are now adults and stuff like that. So one lesson that I chose country policing. I chose positions of authority because I enjoyed doing it. But I'm so blessed to have such a wonderful wife and kids. We're such a tight bunch. And at my 60th a couple of years ago and other times, I've just publicly thanked Helen for raising my kids. And so it's a very noble profession, but don't let it take you away too much. And but even though I did the places I went to and did what I did, I've enjoyed it, and my family. And as I say, I'm so lucky to have such a wonderful wife, and who's been there virtually. I graduated in 81. I met Helen at the end of 81. So she's been a police partner all that time. And so when I was going out in desert patrol, she'd be manning the radio or calling us on the satellite phone and doing female searches when there weren't any female officers. So she's been as much, and now she's a customer service officer for the last couple of decades. And so, it's so important that you just remember who is important. But mate, I've transitioned well. I talked before about I don't see dead people, but the things I've seen in the past are that traumatic. Didn't really worry me, but it was an emotional contact. And can I tell you one more quick story about that?
Of course, mate. Yeah. No, I've got all the time in the world.
Okay, so it involves Dunsborough because it was a ship magnet, and I always remember, and so does people in the community, particularly the first responders with sea rescue and fireys and ambos. On New Year's Eve, would have been 95, 96 or 96, 97, I think it might have been 96, 97. So 30th of December, he got a phone call. It was New Year's Eve, so we had 50,000 more people in town. Boats hasn't come back from fishing, and the boat had a 57-year-old, a 14-year-old son, 44-year-old best mate, and a 32-year-old son-in-law. And they'd gone out and they hadn't come back, and their wives and contacted us and said they haven't come back. So the boat and trailer and the car was still in the car park at near the sea rescue shed. So we knew that something, they were supposed to be back hours earlier. They left at first light. So we went out and I put up a plane straight away. unbeknown to me, survivors saw it, and but we only knew that because of the next day. But that night, the vessel sunk as soon as it got about 20 miles out. They all went in the water. Within a short space of time, the skipper, who's a dad, passed away. The son passed away shortly after that. They tied them together and like a burial at sea and said goodbye. And then the survivor and the 32-year-old son-in-law kept going, and we only know because the next day, and we put out boats and all that type of thing, and the next day, Channel 7 found the survivor and in the water. And I use this footage when I do a talk on resilience because even though it's a really sad story, I had an episode where I fell over a bit, and so the survivor told us that they sunk. Dad and the boy died. During the night, they had a rope tied to them during the night, and they took off they wore Mae West life jackets, and in the raw footage you'll see him wearing a Mae West, and he said the chafing was really bad on the neck, so they had it taken off. And during the night, about 4 a.m, the younger guy, Seamus, said that he was drowning, so he swam over to him, and he had to hold him back, and he drowned. And then he said the survivor was just an incredible individual. He said, I just had to keep going. So when Channel 7 found him, he told us of what had happened. And but we also found, just before we found the survivor, they spotted someone floating, and it was a young fella during the night. And our sea rescue, who are good mates of mine, went over to him, and they gaffed him to pull him over, and they gaffed the life jacket, and it came away, and the body sunk. And they didn't know who it was, and they dived in. They couldn't get him in time, and so they radioed back to the base, which is now New Year's Eve. And there's, as you know, any Summer Bay location, there's just heaps of boats and car trailers and everything there. And we were doing this operation, and I got the call that we don't know who it is, but we've lost the body. And meanwhile, down on the beach, standing there waiting for them to come home, was the wife of the skipper and mother of the 14-year-old, the wife of the 44 and the wife of the 32-year-old. And I had to go down there and tell them. And yeah,
take your time, mate.
I'm talking for all first responders here. So this is the thing that I say about, I can see anything, Adam, but the emotive connection is just something shocking. And so I went down there, and there was, imagine there was hundreds of people down there. And so they saw me coming over, and they raced over and said, what's happening? I said, I'm just going to say this, I don't know how else to say it, but we found one individual and they passed away, but we haven't been able to retrieve the body. I don't know who it is. And then straight away, one of them started up just punching me in the chest, just screaming. Another one dropped to the ground, just wrapping their arms around my knees and just screaming. And the other one just running down the beach, just pulling her hair and screaming. And I was crying. I looked around, and it was like time stopped. And we had New Year's Eve day. It was like a pin could drop. I looked up at my mates in the sea rescue shed on the balcony, and they were all crying and stuff like that. And I just said, I've got to go back, and I've got people to look after him and stuff like that. So then we found the survivor. He told us what had happened. We found Dad and the young boy floating over near Bunbury, and we got them. And so as you'd know, every time you do a search area each day, it grows and grows and grows. So we looked for the missing person for the whole week, and then each week I'd go there and talk to the families. And when I do this talk, I show the media that I did, and you could see how just sad I was and how drained. And then so every day I go there and give them a report, and come back, and next morning be up at 3, the boat would go out and they do the area. And we told them, and they understood that if we come Saturday, we can't find him, and that was it. And they understood. So the last day came, and I went and saw them and told them, and they said, just please thank everyone. And so we know you've done everything you can. So I went back, and then a copper mate grabbed a carton after I'd done the debrief and that, and said, let's go home. So I went home with him with the carton. And I sat down and just cracked the first can, and then got a phone call for a 4-person fatality just down the road. And so I've gone down there, and it was better it was me, because my second man, it was his mate who's a cop. It was his mum and dad and 2 friends and stuff like that. So I dealt with that, and this has been a shit week. I've never dealt with so much death in 7 days. And so after I'd done the prang, I was driving back to the office, and because it was holiday times, as I'm driving the back way to the police station, there was a barbecue on the front lawn. I just remember a kid in a nappy just running out in front of the police car. I was in a Mazda Bravo 4-wheel drive. I've just locked up the car and just narrowly missed hitting this kid. And old mate comes over with his stub. He says, "Oh, mate, you're all right. Sorry about that." And I don't remember getting out of the car. And I just remember being in the middle of the road, just screaming every expletive I can at this guy. And if the kid had been close enough, I would have kicked it. And I just remember stopping, and my hands were just like this. And I just got back in the car and drove off. And then I just went a couple of streets from the station and just sat there for a while, and just until I could stop shaking and go back. And then I just realised I had one of those amygdala hijacks. And I talk about then how you deal with that. And so, yeah, and this, and now I'm starting to think of other tragic things now too. And I know, I think I shared a link to a video talking about me going to a sudden death of a 9-year-old girl who was my daughter's best mate. And we didn't tell her when I came home. We didn't tell her what had happened. So the next day at school, she found out with everyone else, and she was really upset that Dad didn't tell her, and Mum as well, because Mum knew about it and stuff like that. And so, like I said, this comes back to the emotive connection that I have in country towns. You just know all the people and stuff like that. And so like I said, I've never been suffered from visions or flashbacks or whatever, but when I think, and you just saw it then, when I think about the emotive, and that's the biggest, I think, for so many of us, when we think about those and in country towns where you know everyone too. It's so I'm okay. I'll be okay. But yeah,
mate,
so that, yeah.
This is what I love, and mate, thank you for, showing your vulnerable side, and you're human, and this is why I do the podcast, mate, is to highlight to civilian listeners that, and I'm actually going to get emotional now, actually. It's a bloody hard job. It's not for everyone, mate, and it shows that being a first responder, it is a bloody hard job, and there's so much trauma attached to what we do. And when it's not all what the TV shows show, that, oh, look at them, they're doing 100 miles an hour, red and blue lights going like no tomorrow. It's You don't know what we're going into, and you've just highlighted, look at how much death you had in just 1 week. That's 1 week of the job, and you take that over a career of 48 years, mate. I thank you. And that is when you said to me, when I first caught up with you, and you said you want to have me on the podcast. Like, I haven't done anything. Yes, you have, mate. You've done a lot and experienced a lot, and I wanted to get you on, and we spoke before we started that this is why I wanted to get you on, was because you have come up through the ranks, and then you've commissioned into being a commissioned officer, and you can talk about and bridge that gap of of what it's like to be on both sides of the fence, of being a senior officer and then commissioning over to be, on the commission side. So, mate,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. And you talked about your family and the impact that they've gone on the journey with you, and they have the girls, and Mitch and Helen has gone on the this with you, and your mum and dad, and so, mate, what advice would you give to anyone who has got a family member who is either thinking of becoming a first responder, or that they are a first responder? What advice can you give to them to support their partner when they're in the job?
Well, first of all, and can I just say though, after that last bit that we're talking about, there should be a button here for virtual hugs, so you can just hug it out and press your mum. So thanks, mate. I might suggest that to Zoom. I might make some money.
Yeah, good, mate. Great idea.
Adam, I think anyone who wants to become a first responder, first of all, my advice to family, friends, or support them. It is the most noble thing that people can do when you're in the service of others. So please do that, because they must be good people at even now if that's what they want to do. But once they get in, it's about supporting them by way of really just letting them know that they're there, because sometimes we don't want to say things and to people, because sometimes Helen will pick up something I said and she said, "You never told me about that." Well, yeah, but I talked about with a really trusted confidant or something like that. And it's, yeah, so I think it's just support. That's in a way that supports them applying. So once they're in, support them in what they're doing, understanding that they're sometimes they don't want to talk about it, and sometimes they just need time alone or whatever. But just, I think we're better, organisations are better now with our well-being. Before, it was always a six-pack debrief and that's it. But having said that, I'm a big fan of six-pack debrief, not because I'm an alcoholic or anything, but I'm a big fan of just sitting down with a mate and just say, "Hey, I need to have a chat," and whatever. But I think we're in a better position now. Having said that, as you know, we've all experienced losing people by self-harm that people just didn't see coming. And so it's about being more vigilant, more alert to potential issues that people might be going through. And this comes back to just getting to know the people, because the best teams, like I talked about the best team when I was at Protective Services and stuff like that, we knew all our families. We knew we played footy together. We were there together. The teams that have problems is don't promote or create work environments where we don't be people first. And tell us about our families, tell us stuff and that, rather than opposed to people who are insular and they don't want to do that. I think that's a really good way to make sure in a team environment that you can be the best you can as people is going to help you help each other when things get dark or something like that. So, but if you know some family friend wants to be a first responder, just support them in it all the way through it. And but if they're really close to you, as in partner or family member, just be aware. Talk to other family members of first responders. Say, what's it been like to you? What should I be looking out for, and stuff like that. Just do all those things, and then you'll feel better and comfortable that you've done that type of thing.
Well, mate, you know it firsthand. And how many colleagues do you know that have had marriage breakups because
Yeah,
of, the job? And I know it in being a fiery, and I know a lot of ambulance people as well. It is taxing and tolling
yeah,
on your family, and and especially you as a father, when the kids were little and you're doing shift work. Why is daddy cranky? And daddy's just come off a night shift, or
yeah,
and he's had a fatality, or he's dealt with a domestic violence, or whatever it is. Just
yeah.
yeah, just and and would you say, mate, be patient as well? That would be something you'd add in as well.
Oh
Be
yeah,
patient.
yeah, yeah, without a doubt. You just got to, yeah, being patient and knowing when to say something, but knowing when to listen. You just sometimes you just need to shut up and listen sometimes, and that, because when it starts to come out, and that people just need to be heard sometimes, and stuff like that. But yeah, but it's interesting, as you know, we don't always pick the people close to us. I
Yep.
have for a lot of things have been that have affected me when talking with Helen and that. But sometimes first responders are great for helping each other, just because they know it, don't they?
Yeah.
They've been through it, and
Uh, yep.
and
100%, mate. And we experience it together. And, mate, you're nearly out of the job now, and after 48 years, mate, I want you to take your police hat off for a minute, and you're not serving. And this question is to you. Once you're out of the job, mate, what advice would you give to senior management to, as you mentioned, you said it really well, of that, you know, what what part do you play in this mess? But what what advice would you give to senior management to say, hey, guys, like, you know, there seems to be a bit of a cultural problem. What would you say to them to try and change that?
Well, I think listen, and I think, like I said, some organisations, WA Police, they do actually provide opportunity for people to do that, but also for the executive, listen to your senior command as well, because it's okay to listen to the lower ranks who are dealing with it and stuff like that. But I always saw us as having the added benefit of having gone through that, but then understanding the strategic reasons why and stuff like that. And so our lens is a bit different in terms of we can probably see more about what's at stake in terms of the business and stuff like that. I don't lose sight about how much experience you have in that early commissioned officer rank level, because they've done the NCO stuff. They're now operating commissioned officer. But I think it's just about listening. And as long as you're providing the opportunity, and as I said, WA Police do, is about let people talk and tell you and stuff like that. And I think that's the easiest way to do it. And but also, this goes to all the peers and colleagues of the workforce. Encourage everyone to do that. Share, let them know, because as I said, it doesn't happen enough when people don't say, but they've got a lot to say about why things are the way they are.
Okay. And don't bitch about it once you're out and say, the job's fucked. Well, what did you do to make change? Like what did you implement? And
it's like Crime Stoppers. When people come in and complain about crime in the area and say, everyone knows this is happening, and why aren't you doing something? Like, mate, how many times have you run Crime Stoppers? It's the same as in a workforce. Everyone knows it's fucked, and this is, and they shouldn't be doing this. And well, how many times have you actually told someone or done something about it? And so it works the same for me. But fun fact, they reckon 92% of all the people that cause problems in the workplace, Fremantle Dockers supporters.
Oh, mate, you're going to cop some hate there from the Fremantle Dockers.
Spoken like a true West Coast Eagles supporter.
Good man. Go West Coast, mate. So I'm with you. And mate, with around the world, so many police officers are leaving the job, and police forces. I speak to a lot of my mates that I'm getting on the podcast, and they're telling me 4,000 positions vacant here. Worldwide, we're hemorrhaging police officers, mate. Why do you think that is, and how do we stop the hemorrhaging and keep the police in the job? What incentives can we give to say, we can't lose this experience? Because, mate, we've got like constables. I've heard one of my mates told me that there's constables that have been in the job 18 months and now they're teaching the new recruits. Like, how do we hold those senior ranks that we seem to be losing worldwide?
Yeah, I know. But you know what? To me too, whilst I love the job and I've been in it for life and stuff like that, when I reflect and look back, I wish I had showcased what I had 10 years ago and gone somewhere else, and I wish I'd done that. So it's normal for people to develop skills, and there are people out there who are paying really good money, because first responders are highly valued by other organisations and companies, aren't they?
Absolutely.
So you're going to have that aspect of it as well. I mean, when I first joined, even the hard-to-fill places, and we had what we call the Kimberley Club, all the places that are really hard places to live, but there were people lining up to go there. And that was the same as, as I said, my time in the job, where it was a case, and that was before we had extra allowances and extra money and stuff like this. You just wanted to go there for the lifestyle and stuff like that. And so I think, but just the way society's changed. And, I remember when me and Helen got married, my lounge room furniture was outdoor furniture, and carpet was just rugs, and I actually had one of those wooden box TVs with coat hanger here. But
I remember them. I remember those, mate. I remember those.
But nowadays everything's got to be new and stuff. So I just accept that society's changed in that regard. But how do you stop it? I think the messaging coming through. And we famously had a commissioner a few ago that said, and I just look at my list, I've had 8 commissioners since I've been in the job, and one of them famously was about, we only need people only for about 8 or 9 years, then you can go, and that's it. But now we've got a commissioner, and one thing I like about Cole Blanche is he wants to see people that have been in the jobs 30, 40, even 50 years. We've acknowledged some people have been in the job 50 years recently. And so I think if we go back to doing that, but then what are we going to do? And so it's about just working out what are the opportunities we can create for people to want to be there. But I think just changing the language about, we don't want you here just for 5 minutes and, okay, it doesn't matter if you go, and then we'll get more. If we want you there for a long time, what is it we can do to keep you for a long time, and what makes you excited? Like I've been excited the whole career, and so what can we do for that? And I think we have a whole workforce portfolio in WA Police that are doing that, and one thing they're doing, they're listening to people about it. So I think they'll keep on doing that. But the thing is, like I said, society's changed, and we're just like any other. Before then, you joined public service, or you joined the coppers, or you joined the fireys. That was it for life, and that was it. But now there's so many other things out there, and plus, good people are going to even better opportunities because of what we can't compete with. I don't know. So really, if it was easy, it'd be fixed, wouldn't it? But just my advice is keep doing what you're doing, but if we're saying it's about people, make it about people.
Yeah.
Don't just tick the box and stuff like that. So what are the 1%ers that you're doing to make it about people, that people can actually recognise that part of it?
No, I think, there's got to be, they've got to try and either put, the money up, or try and, give a few more weeks leave or something, mate, to try and, because we're, worldwide, we just seem to be losing police to, and so much, like, it's, I mean, you and I won't solve. Yes, sorry, mate.
You said it's worldwide, and that's why it's not just my organisation. It's just not your organisation. It's worldwide, because that's just the way the world is nowadays. So we have to and I think the fun places to be are those ones that are all about people, and you hear about those organisations, and even our organisations go through that.
Yeah.
To me, any organisation is like a footy club. You go through your grand final years when best coach and best leaders on the paddock and all that sort of stuff, and then you just go through some wooden spoon years and things like that. That's just. But what you do is extend. How do you extend that?
The good times,
final,
the
good times out longer, But I've got no doubt every other organisation like mine is trying to do what can we do. They're trying everything, but I'll tell you what, one thing's for sure, when it comes to first responders and the veterans, but when it comes to the first responders, God, we're so fortunate to have them. And when I talk about, I used to love recognising my first responders who were volunteers, because we do this, get paid for it. But look at, you've been a volley and all that type of stuff as well, and mate, other people do their job and then do this community service on top of that.
Yeah,
and that's just so noble, and we're so lucky that and that's when you see really critical incidents happen, that you see the outpouring of people do value and are so thankful that people are around to do that.
Well, mate, it's, you highlight, and I don't like talking about myself much, but 14 and a half years I've been a volunteer firey, so it is. I worked for the service, and then I've continued my volunteering with the service, and 14 and a half years. It's
Hey, tell me when you get to 48, okay?
Yeah, well, mate, as a friend of mine always says, that's cute. That's very.
But mate, seriously, I recognise when I used to love going to functions and recognising our volleys, because, like I said, they're running a shop or whatever, and they're dropping everything affecting their own business to run out and just run into a fire or cut someone out of a car or something like that. And regional Australia is just, if we didn't have people like that, we'd be in a world of hurt, wouldn't we?
Oh, mate, fire rescue with us where we are, mate, they're stretched as it is, and
Yeah,
so it's yeah. No, all my fellow brother and sister volunteers out there, thank you for
yeah,
your service and thank you for
yeah.
what you do, and mate, with everything you've been through and all the traumas you've faced and that you've gone through in the last 48 years, apart from marrying Helen, was joining the police still the best decision you've made, looking back?
Without a doubt, without a doubt, it fills me with pride and that about it. It's something I'm personally proud of and stuff like that. But I look at the friendships formed and inside and outside the job or whatever. I Like I said in that little video that I sent you at the end of it,
Mm,
said you know, aside from dealing with all that crap and death and misery, I wouldn't change a thing. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. And like I said, if you can say that at the end of your career, then it's something that you can feel pretty good about. And that's what I do, mate. So without a doubt, I look back and gee, some of the experiences and everything, and that's what it's about. So to everyone out there, if things aren't going well and you can't see it changing, mate, take a leaf out of your book. I'm going to do something else.
mm,
And you're only on this planet once,
that's
so
right.
enjoy it and don't put yourself through shit. And more importantly, don't put the people that you love through shit as well.
Well said, mate. And I want to, so there's a few final questions, but I wanted to bring this in right at the end, mate. You know, we've spoken about it throughout the podcast, the Bondi terrorist attack,
Yeah,
and I wanted to save this right for the end of the podcast, where you and I spoke off air, and mate, there's been a lot of criticism thrown at police, and mate, you've served in the job for 48 years. You know how hard policing can be, and there's a lot of armchair critics out there. Mate, I've spoken to a lot of my veteran mates as well, and I know now with all the podcasts that I've done, speaking to both veterans and first responders, that the criticism thrown at the police last weekend was disgusting, and what we saw, and where people said, oh, police, they weren't shooting back, and as you know, a Glock can only shoot to 20 meters. So, and this is the fire and movement. And mate, what are your thoughts around, the armchair criticism that was thrown towards the police?
oh, it's just terrible. And one thing that I don't like about being a copper is we don't have the right to reply in the media, do we? We just got to zip it and just put up with these clowns who make these comments, and even the way they actually put photos of the two female officers
Mm,
getting there. And I feel like getting on there and saying, well, last time I checked, it was a female officer that took down the knife murderer in the shopping centre
correct.
recently as well. And
Amy Scott. I know.
yeah,
I know her. Yep, Amy
yeah.
Scott.
So no, yeah, it was terrible. It was terrible, but thank God there's champions that we have, and when we talked before off air about leadership that came out of this, your premier Chris Minns,
Yep.
what he said, that was outstanding. What he said about the coppers and things like that, and people always talk up for us, but I don't like the fact that we don't have a right of reply, but. Anyone that was faced with it'd be crazy environment, wouldn't it? You'd be when it first happened, you'd be thinking, "Fuck, am I seeing this? Is this
Mm.
happening right now?" And then to go into it and do what had to be done, and the coppers that were there, including as you say, the one that ended it and things like that, and then to see the footage of him ending it, but then the younger crook spotting him and him trying to hide behind the tree, and gee, it's and you'd
And
just be thinking about
And as you
what
said,
could
mate,
happen.
sorry to cut you off, Stewie.
Yeah,
As you said, you know, and I did a podcast yesterday with Victorian police officer, and he said the amount of cortisol that your heart can
yeah,
beat up to 400 beats per minute when you've got, when your life is on the line and you have got, you're not police officers, and you know this, mate, from your training. Police officers aren't trained to do fire and movement. It's not.
yeah,
That's not. No, that's what the military do. The military do that with
yeah,
long arm, weapons, and so for what they did, and that photo of the female officer, I want to highlight this to the listener. That was taken after the young offender had been taken into custody and the father had been pronounced dead. So that image was taken
Yeah,
after the incident happened. And it's funny how the media forget to mention that was taken, that shot of that photo was taken after that. Just wanted to
yeah.
highlight that to the listener, that was taken after the fact.
Yeah, no, exactly. But mate, to answer your question, I think it's terrible. We'll in this day and age of social media, we're always going to be faced by these clowns that know it all, and yeah, it was terrible. But I'll tell you what, and we've spoken a bit about it. The lessons in leadership that come out of a crisis event like this is
Yep.
just you see how people will be remembered by by how they stood up for others and. In the aftermath as well. And I think there's going to be so many lessons out of this, and there's going to be people that didn't stand up quite as much that
Mm.
are going to be held accountable too. But anyway, that's
And that's another
yeah,
story. And
yeah,
mate, all I can say is to every first responder or every member of the public that was there and rendered first aid, or you did a fantastic job. And it's tragic. It's absolutely tragic that 15 people lost their lives to radicalism
yeah,
and these cowards. And I'm going to call them out, mate. Not your words, my
yeah,
words. Absolute
yeah,
cowards. Shooting old innocent people that have no, like animals. You're
yeah.
cowardly. There's nothing heroic about what you did. You're cowards. And anyway, I'll leave it at that. That's that's
Yeah,
that's my that's
mate,
my
I don't mind. I don't mind saying stuff like that because I've only got 13 sleeps to go,
yeah,
and this is going to be out after then anyway. But you're
exactly.
right; they're absolute cowards. And but as we said before, too, is what we have to do. What now is in the hands of the Australian people. Unfortunately, we live in a world where it's not a case of if it's going to happen again; it's going to be when
When
it's going to happen again. But how can we? What are we going to do today in the future to extend that period out?
mm.
So people and families and individuals aren't going to suffer what was suffered then. So hopefully everyone will get their shit together and do it for all the right reasons.
And as you say, mate, the after action review that will
Yeah.
come out of this, and hopefully lessons are learnt to move forward. And yeah, I'll leave it at that, mate. I think you've answered that really well, and just good job to all your fellow brothers and sisters in blue for a really a situation that we haven't seen before.
Yeah.
And good job to all guys on the ground that
Yeah.
who rendered
Eds,
aid.
can I just top it off then by just saying
Sure.
in terms of a leadership lesson, what did you see in individuals that you saw that was people that stood up in terms of the response, but particularly afterwards as well? What were the leaders that you saw that I really like that? And I'm just going to say one like Chris Minns. I don't know. I don't live in New South Wales, so I don't know how his reputation is like or whatever. But
Mm.
what are the one percenters that I saw him do? But what are the one percenters that you saw in leaders, whether it be first responders, community leaders, or whatever? What did they do so well that you think that shit? I need to be better at that. And so, what might you take away from that? And that's how we become better leaders. We see others and think, gee, I want to be like that. Who's the best leader you've worked for? What are the traits that they had that you could actually just add to your tool belt and become a better person as much as a better leader?
Absolutely. Well said, mate. And there's many I mentioned to you off air that I could list the list is as long as my arm of who I saw and what I was mate, I'll say it. I was the opposition leader, Kelly Sloan. She ran into fire and rendered aid, like she parked her car when she heard and actually went in and started helping treat the victims. Like that's just bravery in itself. The guy that tackled, the gunman, absolute leadership. And, when everyone else, when that fight, flight, freeze, he chose to fight and, helped and suffered critical injuries and may lose his arm. The police commissioner of New South Wales he was on the front foot, and you only saw it a day later when, the six men in a car were dragged and were, dragged out of a car. Like,
Yeah,
this is leadership, mate. This is what leadership
yeah,
is. And I could keep going and rattle off, but I won't.
yeah,
But
yeah,
they're just examples of what, good leadership looks like, and being on the front foot and being proactive and not reactive. So
yeah.
yeah, but mate, absolutely great insight. And mate, couple of final questions, and thank you so much for your time, for what you've given me today, and it's just
Sure.
been an absolute honour and a privilege to have you on and share your
Oh,
story. And you know,
same.
it really has, mate. To when you said to me, "Oh, I've got imposter syndrome ads," I don't really think I've got a story. Well, mate, we've nearly been speaking for 3 hours, so that's just on the podcast, not
Mm.
beforehand. But
Yeah,
mate,
yeah.
knowing what you know now, and all that you've been through, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self, and would he listen?
Probably might not listen. Best advice I would do is just remember, zip it and listen sometimes. Okay. Yeah, zip it and listen. And because I would have taken on a lot more sooner. And people know a lot more than you, whether you think it or not. And one of the other things I say about leadership is just get over yourself first. And I always remember, and this would be a quick one that people would resonate being coppers, but I remember the first time I got put on my ass as a copper, and I vowed, and I had a crook giving us a problem, and I thought, no, hey, I'll sort this out. And so I went toe to toe, and he put me on my ass. And then after that, I said, I'm never going to let that happen again. It was yeah, and I just worked out using the gift of the gab instead of the fist is sometimes a lot easier and a lot better. But no, I think for myself, my 18-year-old self, it's just about just listen, watch, and listen.
Mm.
And there's so many people out there that will be able to show you the way, and particularly look out for the ones who shine above others, and ask yourself, what is it about them that I want to be like? And then work that out. And even have conversations with them. Don't be scared to talk to some. I was shy as a kid and stuff like that. And sometimes I think I was shy as a copper too, amongst people. Like, I thought you talk about imposter syndrome. I got to a certain point as a commissioned officer where I said, you know what? They're thinking just like me. They're not better than me. They've got it like me. So, yeah, mate, and answer your question, just listen,
Mm.
watch and listen.
And it's great advice to any young player out there, mate. Is definitely, you might think at 18 you know everything. You don't. I can say
Yeah.
that with a few decades on from being 18 now, and I'm still learning every single day, mate. I still, listen to advice from you and many others who have been where I've been and where I want to get to and what I want to
Yeah.
achieve. So absolutely, definitely listen to, and sometimes the older person that's giving the advice doesn't want to see you go through the same pain of what
Yeah.
they've gone through in the
Exactly.
past. So
Exactly.
whether you
Yeah.
choose to take it on board or not is up to you.
Yeah.
But if the
Yeah.
advice is given, it's free, take it. So yeah,
Yeah.
great advice, mate. And mate,
And do,
oh,
I was
sorry,
just
mate.
saying, and do well at school too. Don't fail all your subjects.
Great. Yeah, definitely, mate. Definitely. No, oh, mate, if we could all go back now, how things would be very different. And,
Yeah.
mate, what advice would you give to any young person that is thinking of joining, the job of either being a police officer? I know you've said it to the families, but what advice would you give to, any young person that wants to be a copper or a fiery or an amber or a corrections officer, or what advice do you have?
Do it. Do it. Take and look for and take opportunities that come along. That's first and foremost. Just do it. If that's what rocks your boat and you're really passionate about doing, go for it. And once again, listen from the people who've gone before you and stuff like that. But yeah, mate, why wouldn't you? If you've got a passion to do something like that, just go for it. Look for the opportunities. Though one thing I don't like seeing is in our job is people who are only in the job 5 minutes. They've already put the feet up and they're just sitting back and they're just pulling a wage and stuff like that and stuff like that. If you're going to do it, go in boots and hearts and all.
Mm,
And I'll tell you what, if you do, you'll bump into people like the people that you talk to on your podcast, and you will quickly find out that by doing it with all the right intent, being a good, decent person within and within the community, you gain so much respect, and that leads to other opportunities, whether it be within your organisation that you join or outside. People actually look for people with those skills. As you know, you've talked to a heap of veterans as well that have people just snap them up in terms of what they have and what they can bring to their organisation. So it's going to help you in the future as much as right now. But just do it.
And I'll add in as well, as a fellow first responder, be prepared, and I know Stewie will back me up on this. Be prepared that you are going to face trauma. You are going to see it. It is going to be confronting, but put the right coping mechanisms in place to help you with that trauma too, and process that trauma. So just my own little add-on
Yeah,
to
it's good advice.
what
Yeah,
Stewie said. So yeah, it sometimes is forgotten, and that you are going to face traumas that you might not have ever thought in your wildest dreams that you would face. So yeah, definitely
probably and you'll agree with this, Adam. The bad things we experience and see are far outweighed by all the great stuff.
I 100% would agree. 100%. Yeah, there's the 1% of traumas. 99% of the good makes up for that 1% of traumas that we see.
And I heard you talking. I don't know if it was Zach or Charlie or Todd. It might have been Todd, but you touched on black humour.
Yeah.
And isn't that a godsend when we deal with the crap we do?
Yeah.
You just you can come back from, and we've all experienced it. You can come back, and everyone's knackered. Everyone's just seen and done some crazy shit, and you sit down, and it's broken by someone just saying something that it's gold.
I'm laughing with you because sometimes you walk back and go, and all it can be is, that was fucked. And then that starts. No, definitely, mate. And mate, in your opinion, what more needs to be done to help first responders, be it with support offered for trauma, that we see on a day-to-day basis, mate? Is it introduction of a white card where we can go and get some some help, or where we get paid for the psych, and if we get injured on the job, like a bit of physio, to what more can be done, mate? Do you feel?
Mate, I think just the use of it, because I think we're in a better place with organisations as to what they provide. Like us, we've got more psychs and we've got all these other services, the EAP and all this other stuff. But it comes back to this is where you are accountable as a leader or a manager, is about we're going to walk it. We're going to walk the walk, not talk it, not just tick the box and, hey, everyone, don't forget the health and wellbeing plan, and it goes up on the shelf and that's it. It's about how do you make it normal business. So I always say a good way to do it is when we have staff meetings, don't bring up work first. Don't, as coppers, we talk about crime and road policing and fleet and, housing. We talk about that, and then with general business, anyone want to bring anything up? And if you have, how's it? Make it right at the front of your meetings about, if it's about people, which we all hear about, our biggest asset, most important asset is people. Well, make it the most important asset. So when you're having a team meeting, have that that check-in, that health check-in, how are we all going and stuff like that, and do that. And I think that's the key thing. We've got enough of stuff. I reckon we've got enough stuff, and but let's talk it, and every day, particularly during staff meetings, make it a point of normal business, not just something that's on the shelf.
Well said, mate. Well said. And just now implement it to move forward and try and make just make things better, and mental, and as you know yourself, people's tolerance to trauma is different. Every single person, you can have 48 years and have what you've seen and experienced. Someone can be in the job for 5 minutes and go to a really terrible, accident or a domestic violence, or whatever it is, and their tolerance might be a bit lower than what yours is. You just never know, and implement it, and
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
yeah, yeah.
Exactly right. And mate, I've got two final questions, and this one, you mentioned it earlier, and I wanted to wait till right now towards the end, mate. What lessons have you learnt from your greatest failures? Like you mentioned that you missed out on the superintendent, and you've had to overcome adversity. What lessons have you learnt from failure?
That what did I do? This thing about what's my part in the mess. Stop blaming others. Hold up the mirror before you start throwing rocks at other people and stuff like that. If you've got a problem person on the unit, when I get people now to come and see, well, I used to, if someone came and see me and they've got a problem person in their station or work unit, and they'll tell me, we've got to do this, got to get rid of them and stuff like that. I said, what's your part in the mess? So whenever you got challenges or whatever, hold up the mirror first, and it may be a big thing, it might be a little thing or whatever, but there's always things that we need to do. And the other thing another lesson that I have is about find your mantra. If to become a better leader, to become a better team member, you have to be a better person. So what is your mantra about being a good person? As I said, mine's exceptional, ethical, and brave. Mm-hmm. What's your mantra that means so much to you to help you do that? And the last thing is about, well, let's do something about it. And so there's this thing that I like using called stop, keep, start. And so it's really easy to do. You could do it on one page for a multi-organisation, but it's about, okay, so if I've identified some things with myself, others or whatever, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to stop doing? And what does that look like? What are we going to keep doing? And what are we going to start doing to make change? It's as simple as that. So there's probably three things that I've found that I probably wish I'd have known a bit sooner too. But, there's so much more.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it, mate?
Oh, yeah. Being a leader in WA Police, being a leader in any other policing organisation or first responder, but being in a police organisation, it's not just about reds and green, catching crooks and handing out tickets and all that type of stuff too. It's about if you're going to make change, it's about the people side of stuff. And as I say, everyone, you hear it all the time, people are our most important asset. Make it the most important asset, and you will make change. And people will look back and say, fuck, I'm glad I worked with him, her, or whatever. Mm. That's the type of people we remember. And
mate, you're speaking of some of you still speak of, and throughout this podcast, you've spoken of some of the leaders, some of the great leaders you've worked for, and some of them have passed on now. Like that's a legacy, mate. That's what a legacy is. And you mentioned, your legacy, like. You hope that people in the future will say Stewie was, he was a good boss. He really cared and actually gave a shit. And mate, that's all you can do. And mate, if that's all your legacy is, that he was a good mate. All I want my legacy to be is he was a good, honest, hard-working, good bloke that cared for others. Mate, that's the legacy I want to leave. That's what I want to leave this world in. And
a good legacy.
Yeah, that's how I look at it now, mate. And so, mate, what are your plans going forward now with your family?
To see at least one West Coast Eagles premiership in the next 5 years together. All right. No, look, mate, I'm just now. We're so blessed, me and Helen, to have our first granddaughter, and there may be some more, and that'd be great. But I just want to be there for my kids, and as I said before, Helen's done so well bringing them up, but they're successful, all of them, and I just want to be there to champion them and just be there to say good on you, and that's what we got. That's all I want to do now. It's I just want to enjoy the rest of my time on the planet, just seeing good stuff from them and just helping them if they need help, like anyone else would or whatever. Mate, I've got to tell you. And I feel I hope this isn't a trigger for people, but one thing that I've really enjoyed is socialising with your kids as adults. I feel sorry for people who may be estranged from the kids and that.
Mm.
I didn't realise just how fun it is and how good it is. So I want to enjoy all those fun times and be there to do whatever I can and that. So yeah.
Mate, I think you've earned that right after, 48 years of service, and you look back, mate, I can tell you are a good dad, and I know myself, mate. I moved home back to be with my dad as he's got dementia, and mate, it was the easiest decision in the world. It was just, yep,
Yeah.
that's what you do. And I've now got the toughest job, mate, where it's the long goodbye. This is the long goodbye, and it's
Yeah.
shit. It really sucks. And mate, you and Helen deserve, to enjoy the time now together and with your kids and the wider family and friends. And because you've earned it, Stu,
Yeah.
you really have, mate. And
Oh,
mate,
thanks.
you
Thanks, mate.
have, mate, and mate, how do people follow you if they want to get in touch and they, like organisations want to reach out to you about leadership, or like how do they get in touch with you?
Oh, if they want to, they can probably LinkedIn's a really easy one. Go on there and just Geoff Stewart. Geoff spelt the proper way, GEO. Stewart, STEWART. But just look me up on LinkedIn. There's contact details there. But like I said, I just put out a newsletter, as you know, ads, and I just ask people from all around the world, just about 4, 6 of them at a time, saying, "What do you reckon about the topic?" And they give me some words, and then we just have something like this. We all jump on,
Mm,
and everyone gets from all around the world, and we get to share. This is what I reckon. What do you reckon? And the stuff I do around the leadership, I don't tell people what they should be doing. I'm still learning, so I just ask questions,
mm.
and that's the easiest way to learn and stuff like that. But if anyone wants to jump online or get a newsletter, they'll be on my LinkedIn and that. But yeah, it's how we learn by
It's
hearing, comparing stories like this.
It is, mate, and we'll put the links in the show notes when the potty does drop, mate. And mate, what a story! You told me before we started. Oh, ads, I don't really have a story. Well, mate, it's hard to highlight, and as I said, I've had to gloss over. There was a lot more in your 48 years, but we could have spoken for another 6 or 7 hours. But mate, this is just a glimpse of 48 years of service in, WA police, and getting to the dizzy ranks of, of superintendent, mate. And who would have thought when you joined as a cadet that you would get all the way to be a superintendent? And mate, just I want to thank you, and I want to thank you for your service to our country and your state of Western Australia. Thank you for the work that you do for first responders and people who are struggling with mental health. And I really do appreciate you coming on True Blue and sharing your story, mate, because I know it's not easy. And yeah, thank you for trusting me to share your story, mate. It's been an absolute honour.
Well, mate, I really appreciate our chats. The one we had in Kings Park months ago, and this one now has been. I've really enjoyed it, and that's a credit to you about the way you do these. But what you're doing means so much to so many people, and you even telling your own story through your book and everything else. But I know how highly rated you are by so many people, and that's a credit to you and your family, mate. But thank you for everything you've done for me, and thank you.
Nah, mate, and I look forward to getting back over there again next year, mate, and catching up with you again. And Kings Park, it's a good spot, mate. So I think we'll make that the spot, and we might
You
actually
know,
we might get Timmy over with us too.
mate, an even better spot, and Timmy would hate this because he's a Freo Docker supporter. An even better spot would be the Derby when the Eagles play the Dockers and we thrash them. That would be even better.
Well, mate,
Yeah.
we might have to tee that up, mate. So, but no, it's mate. As I say, thank you so much, and we will catch up because I've actually got to come back over and I've got to record a couple more potties over
Yeah.
there. So, and I wanted to get yours out. I would have loved to have done it in person, but
Yeah.
this is the next best thing, mate, and we will catch up again. So, mate, thank you so much for coming on, and we'll stay in touch.
Thanks, Ads. Thank
Cheers,
you.
mate.
Thanks for listening to True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Bloom. Real talk with those that pledge to keep us safe with grit, sacrifice, and determination. See you next time.